Phoenix Nights. Chapter 3558. Rumble. Heaven and earth seemed to be collapsing. A terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth spread in all directions. The protective formation of the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan was actually broken. The Pain Clan used all their strength, excluding the extreme path power, and finally attacked the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan. Kill! Without any reason, the soldiers of the Pain Clan rushed into the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan like a tide. The Heavenly Fire Clan was defeated, and countless clansmen fled in all directions. Roar! The higher-ups of the Heavenly Fire Clan were all stunned when they saw this scene. Preposterous! The eyes of the expert of the Heavenly Fire Clan, Feng Wu, were red. She directly forced Pang Xianer to retreat, and then rushed into the depths of the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan. Soon, a divine palace rose into the sky, trying to escape. The divine palace was engraved with ancient runes. Shrouded by a mass of divine fire, it rose into the sky, trying to escape. However, right at that moment, a giant hand descended from the sky and grabbed the divine palace in its hand. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned. The big hand directly grabbed the divine palace, and then disappeared into the void. All of you, go to hell! At this moment, an angry roar suddenly came from the depths of the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan. The next moment, a figure directly walked out from the depths of the ancestral land of the Heavenly Fire Clan. It was a white-haired old man. This old man was tall, and his long white hair fluttered without any wind. Then, this old man directly attacked. Endless divine fire emerged from the old man's body, condensing into an incomparably ferocious beast, and then pounced on the experts of the Pain Clan. Screams suddenly sounded, and more than a dozen cultivators of the Pain Clan were instantly burned to ashes by the divine fire. Their bodies and souls were directly destroyed, and they died completely. Old man, you finally can't help but attack? At this moment, an old voice came from afar, and then, a figure appeared at the end of the sky. However, this figure only took one step, and instantly appeared in front of them. This speed shocked even Gu Fei's doppelganger, who was watching the battle from the side. It's you? You're actually not dead yet? The elder of the Heavenly Fire Clan was startled when he saw the newcomer. Haha, if I die, who will play with you? The old man laughed, and said. That's true. The old man of the Skyfire Clan nodded. Then let's put an end to this today, the old ancestor of the Skyfire Clan said. Very well, let's do that, another old man said. Old ancestor. All the clansmen of the Pain Clan were indescribably shocked. They didn't think that even their old ancestor would take action. Could it be that the person who could contend against the old ancestor was actually the clan lord of the Heavenly Fire Clan? Come! The old ancestor of the Skyfire Clan extended his hand and slapped out at the old ancestor of the Pain Clan. A violent force enveloped the entire void. Good timing! The Pain Clan's patriarch bellowed and also slapped forward with his palm. Boom! The two palms collided with a loud bang. In the next moment, the void around the two palms was annihilated and collapsed. Then, the two palms separated and two figures moved in the void like phantoms. Terrifying and monstrous energy waves spread out, forcing the surrounding cultivators to retreat. These two fellas. Gu Fei's doppelganger saw this scene from afar and couldn't help but be moved. If the world hadn't changed, these two fellas could have easily used the power of the extreme path. However, the world had changed. No one dared to use the power of the extreme path for fear of triggering the heavenly punishment. One should know that the consequences of triggering the heavenly punishment were very serious. At this time, the defeat of the Skyfire Clan was already decided. No matter how powerful the old ancestor of the Skyfire Clan was, he couldn't turn the situation around. The soldiers of the Pain Clan began to hunt down the fleeing cultivators of the Skyfire Clan in an orderly manner. More and more cultivators of the Skyfire Clan were caught up and killed. However, this was the ancestral land of the Skyfire Clan after all. There were countless experts cultivating here. From time to time, experts would suddenly rush out and cause heavy losses to the Pain Clan. At this time, Pang Xian'er had killed her way into the depths of the ancestral land of the Skyfire clan. "How dare you come in? Aren't you afraid of death?" Feng Wu's voice came. "What?" Pang Xian'er couldn't help but be surprised when she heard this. Boom! Suddenly, an iron cage fell from the sky and directly enveloped Pang Xian'er. Pang Xian'er's shock was really no small matter. "Roar!" Pang Xian'er roared, and the divine sword in her hand directly slashed at the iron cage. The clanging sound was endless, and sparks were splashed. However, when Pang Xian'er took a look at the place where her divine sword had slashed, she was dumbfounded. There was not even a trace left on the place where her divine sword had slashed. "Kill!" Feng Wu directly attacked. Endless sword light pierced Pang Xian'er, who was trapped in the iron cage, from all directions. Each sword light was as bright as a divine rainbow. "Damn it!" Pang Xian'er was shocked and angry. As she moved her mind, a sword light broke out from her body and turned into a sword wave that enveloped her. Countless sword lights directly collided with the layer of sword wave on Pang Xian'er. Pang Xian'er defended with all her strength, while Feng Wu attacked with all her strength. The sword wave on Pang Xian'er's body vibrated violently, and showed signs of collapsing. "What?" Pang Xian'er was really shocked. The other party's sword Dao cultivation was so powerful. For a moment, she was very passive and could only defend passively. Soon, a sword light from Feng Wu directly broke through the protective divine light on Pang Xian'er's body, leaving a bloody mark on her shoulder. "What should I do?" Pang Xian'er's forehead was sweating. Just when she couldn't think of any good way, a big hand directly grabbed from the sky and directly grabbed the iron cage that enveloped Pang Xian'er. Feng Wu, on the other hand, cried out in fear and turned around to flee. At this time, the Heavenly Fire clan's momentum was gone. Feng Wu was also a member of the Heavenly Fire clan, but Feng Wu came from the Fire Phoenix clan. Although there were few members of this clan, each of them was a peerless expert. "Old man, are you bullying the young by attacking the younger generation?" An old voice sounded. "I want to bully the young, that's not allowed," another equally old voice said. "Humph!" The other old man didn't speak anymore, but directly attacked. The whole world immediately shook again, and an extremely tyrannical power broke out. The old ancestor of the Heavenly Fire clan and the old ancestor of the Pain clan fought. A battle of this level was the most attractive. Even Gu Fei's doppelganger didn't leave and watched the battle from a distance. At this time, some experts of the Pain clan also stopped. The war against the Heavenly Fire clan went unusually smoothly. The Heavenly Fire clan shouldn't be so weak. The Heavenly Fire clan of the Central Continent was probably going to be wiped out. No one thought that the Heavenly Fire clan would be so vulnerable. This actually benefited the Pain clan. The Pain clan's territory had expanded several times. Although the Pain clan won this battle beautifully, they also suffered great losses. Countless soldiers died in this battle, and even the old ancestor of the Pain clan was beheaded. Moreover, the most important thing was that although the Pain clan had defeated the Heavenly Fire clan, there was still fighting in other places. For a moment, the Central Continent was still in chaos. While the Central Continent was in turmoil, someone launched an attack on the Pain clan. In the West Continent, a group of soldiers directly tore through the defensive line and killed their way in. The leader of this group of soldiers was actually a death creature, tyrannical to the extreme. Without any suspense, the soldiers of the West Continent directly killed their way into the Central Continent's territory that originally belonged to the Heavenly Fire clan, occupying more than a dozen cities. Then, there was also a superpower in the South Continent that had been eyeing the Central Continent, but they hadn't found an opportunity. Now, the opportunity had finally come. The superpower in the South Continent naturally wouldn't waste this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They directly killed their way into the Central Continent and occupied more than a dozen cities. This shocked and angered the senior members of the Pain clan. These fellows actually took advantage of the situation and directly killed their way into the Central Continent, occupying the land that originally belonged to the Pain clan. How could they tolerate this? The Pang clan directly sent experts to conquer the cultivation forces in the West Continent and the South Continent. Battles continued in the Central Continent. Apart from the West Continent and the South Continent, even the clan lord of the chaotic Golden Rock clan in the East Continent, Sung Kei, intended to take advantage of this opportunity to kill his way into the Central Continent and settle down there. However, Sung Kei had never seen Gu Fei. If he wanted to enter the Central Continent, he definitely needed Gu Fei's approval. One should know that the current Central Continent was definitely a big fat piece of meat in the eyes of all the forces. Everyone wanted a bite. Of course, not everyone was qualified to take a bite of this fat piece of meat. On this day, Sung Kei arrived outside the place where Gu Fei was cultivating in seclusion. However, as expected, he was stopped by the giant spirit demon again. He couldn't even enter the valley where Gu Fei was. Sung Kei actually had a way to enter the valley, but he didn't want to offend Gu Fei because the consequences of offending Gu Fei were very serious. If he offended Gu Fei and lost Gu Fei's support, it would be almost impossible for him to defend the East Continent, let alone invade the Central Continent. This was because the forces in the East Continent seemed to obey him on the surface, but in fact, the actual controller of these forces was Gu Fei. Whether it was the Deity Clan, the Mysterious Snake Clan, or the Earth Spirit Clan, these forces were truly loyal to Gu Fei, not Sang Quebec. As long as Gu Fei said a word, Sung Kei would immediately become a general without a stick. Sung Kei was very clear about his situation, so he was very afraid of offending Gu Fei. This was because everything he had now was related to Gu Fei, and he couldn't do without Gu Fei's support. Even if he was a puppet, Sung Kei would accept it. After all, Gu Fei would have to leave in the end, and the East Continent would eventually belong to the chaotic Golden Rock clan. In order to obtain Gu Fei's support, Sung Kei came to the valley almost every day to see if Gu Fei had come out of seclusion. Chapter 3559. A storm was brewing in the Central Continent. The Pang clan's army defeated the Skyfire clan's army and occupied the Skyfire clan's ancestral land. Then, they began to encircle the remaining members of the Skyfire clan. Meanwhile, the old ancestor of the Skyfire clan and the old ancestor of the Pang clan fought their way into the depths of the starry sky and fought in the distant Nine Heavens starry sky. Even in the Central Continent, one could still sense the two mighty auras descending from the Nine Heavens starry sky. The old ancestor of the Skyfire clan was definitely in existence at the extreme grade, while the old ancestor of the Pang clan was also an extreme grade expert. However, both of them carefully controlled their powers and did not let their powers break through to the extreme grade. The two extreme Dao experts had sealed their extreme Dao cultivation. They had no choice but to do so. After all, the ancestral god realm was no longer the ancestral god realm of the past. The appearance of heavenly punishment made even extreme grade supremes bow their heads. No extreme grade supremes dared to treat their lives as a joke. Gu Fei's doppelganger also came to the Nine Heavens starry sky and watched the battle between the old ancestor of the Skyfire clan and the old ancestor of the Pang clan from afar. The old ancestor of the Pang clan stretched out his hand and grabbed over a dozen stars. Then, he refined them into a dozen divine beads and threw them at the old ancestor of the Skyfire clan. Humph! The old ancestor of the Skyfire clan sneered and punched out. The power of a quasi-supreme expert instantly condensed into a huge flaming fist. Boom! The flaming fist swept across the sky and directly blew up the dozen divine beads. Then, it continued to smash towards the old ancestor of the Pang clan on the other side of the starry sky. Wherever the flaming fist passed, countless stars exploded and the void was annihilated. It was as terrifying as if the world was about to be destroyed. Although it was also the power of a quasi-supreme expert, the old ancestor of the Skyfire clan's control over this level of power had reached the point of perfection. It was also the power of a quasi-supreme expert, but in the hands of the old ancestor of the Skyfire clan, the power displayed was much stronger than that of other quasi-supreme experts. Swoosh! The old ancestor of the Pang clan also made a move. He pointed a finger, and a ball of divine light emerged from the tip of his finger, then directly flew towards the flaming fist. Boom! With a loud bang, the ball of divine light that rushed out of the Pang clan's patriarch's fingertip collided with the fiery fist. At that moment, the ball of divine light emitted a light that was 1,000 times more powerful than the divine sun, illuminating the entire dark starry sky. Two quasi-supreme level powers erupted, and the divine light that blossomed made Gu Fei's clone almost unable to open its eyes. The energy fluctuations that erupted spread for millions of miles. Countless stars exploded, and a small half of the stars in the entire star field completely disappeared in the starry sky. Everyone was indescribably shocked. At this time, the figures of the Heavenly Fire Clan and the Pang Clan's old ancestors were moving rapidly. Powerful quasi-supreme level powers were constantly erupting, shaking the entire starry sky. Many experts who had entered the Nine Heaven starry sky to watch the battle were stunned by this scene. "Is this still the power of a quasi-supreme?" someone exclaimed. The battle strength displayed by the Heavenly Fire Clan and the Pang Clan's old ancestors was too frightening. It was even more powerful and terrifying than peak quasi-supreme level existences. However, the two experts' control of power was really amazing. Even Gu Fei's clone couldn't help but be moved. Even he might not be able to do it. After all, these two fellas were genuine extreme supreme level experts. In the entire ancestral god realm, there were actually two extreme supreme level experts hidden in the central continent. This could be considered a miracle. In the current era, extreme supreme level experts were almost impossible to find. However, due to various reasons, some extreme supreme level experts didn't disappear and stayed in the ancestral god realm. For example, the Fire Ape primogenitor was sealed by the Golden Crow primogenitor in the first ancestral vein of the ancestral god realm's eastern continent. Then, when Gu Fei and Sun Ke attacked the Golden Crow clan, he was released by the Golden Crow clan's old ancestor. However, the reason why the Heavenly Fire clan's old ancestor and the Pang clan's old ancestor could still stay in the ancestral god realm was definitely a huge secret. The battle between the two great experts shattered the starry sky and destroyed countless stars. In the end, the two great experts fought their way into the primal chaos. No one knew the outcome of the battle. One should know that no one was willing to enter the primal chaos to watch the battle because it would be difficult to come out if one was trapped in there. Gu Fei's clone didn't chase into the primal chaos. In the end, only the Pang clan's old ancestor returned to the Pang clan's ancestral land. The Pang clan's old ancestor returned with heavy injuries. The Pang clan's old ancestor didn't say much about the battle and directly went into seclusion to heal his injuries. The Heavenly Fire clan's old ancestor never appeared again. Some people guessed that the Heavenly Fire clan's old ancestor was killed by the Pang clan's old ancestor. However, some people didn't think that the Pang clan's old ancestor could kill the Heavenly Fire clan's old ancestor. Gu Fei's clone didn't return to the East Continent. Instead, he continued to travel in the Central Continent. At this time, the Central Continent was already in chaos. Everywhere he went, he saw scenes of people being plunged into misery and suffering. When immortals fought, mortals suffered. It was absolutely impossible for the mortal world to not be affected when such a big thing happened in the Central Continent's cultivation world. On the morning of the third day after the battle between the old ancestors, Gu Fei's clone came to a city that wasn't very big. He saw black smoke coming out of the city. The city gate had been broken, and there were more than a dozen corpses lying outside the city gate. Gu Fei's clone realized that these corpses weren't the corpses of cultivators, but the corpses of mortals. They actually killed mortals? Gu Fei's clone was immediately angry. Among the corpses of mortals, there were many young and strong people. He had always hated cultivators killing mortals. It must be known that mortals were the foundation of the world of cultivation. Cultivators had evolved from mortals. Cultivators could not forget their origins after obtaining a powerful cultivation base. Haha! At this moment, an unbridled laughter rang out from the city. Gu Fei's clone suddenly raised his head, and a glimmer of light shone in his eyes. The next moment, his figure disappeared into the void without a trace. The next moment, Gu Fei's figure appeared in the sky above the city. A strong smell of blood immediately rushed into his nose. He looked down and saw that the square in the city was filled with corpses. In the middle of the square, there was an altar that was 30 feet high. It was a blood-colored altar. There were 3 cultivators in red standing on the blood-colored altar. One of the 3 cultivators, a middle-aged man, had slashed out with his sword and killed a mortal, who was already trembling in fear, on the altar. A stream of blood rushed out of the mortal's body, and it was directly devoured by the blood-colored altar. The middle-aged cultivator directly threw the mortal off the altar. At this time, there were dozens of mortals kneeling around the blood-colored altar. These mortals were shocked by the scene on the altar. There were actually children among these mortals. "Bad people! You are bad people!" A childish voice rang out, and a thin figure stood up from the ground. His face was stained with blood. However, his eyes were filled with intelligence. He was not intimidated by the 3 red-robed cultivators on the altar at all. Gu Fei's clone saw that it was a little boy. "This child is not bad." Gu Fei's clone could not help but nod. This little boy was only 5 or 6 years old, but he was braver than the average little boy. He seemed to be very sensible. "Oh my, I didn't think that there would be such a good seedling in this small place." The middle-aged cultivator looked down at the little boy under the altar. The little boy's life was in his hands, but he did not make a move. "Ha ha, senior brother, do you want to take this child as your disciple?" Another cultivator in red suddenly said with a smile. At the same time, a cold light flashed between his fingers. A silver needle immediately shot towards the little boy. "You!" The middle-aged cultivator was furious, but he did not make a move to save the little boy. Just as the little boy was about to be hit by the silver needle suddenly disappeared. In the next moment, the red-clothed cultivator who shot out the silver needle suddenly fell onto the altar. In the next moment, a powerful stream of blood rushed out of the cultivator in red's head. This stream of blood was directly devoured by the blood-colored altar. "Collecting the essence of mortals?" Gu Fei's clone said. The cultivator in red suddenly fell on the altar. His essence was devoured by the altar, and he died. This scene scared the middle-aged cultivator and the other cultivator in red so much that their faces turned pale. Shwa! A black light flew out of the middle-aged cultivator's body. It was a magic treasure in the shape of a crescent moon. It was surrounded by sharp blades, and one would be cut by just touching it. A cold and gloomy aura spread out from the magic treasure. The other cultivator in red directly opened his mouth and spat out a blood-colored flying sword. The flying sword turned into a blood-colored sword light that circled around his body. "Who's the one behind this attack? Get out here!" The middle-aged cultivator looked around nervously, but he did not find anything. "Who is it? If you don't get out here, I will kill all these mortals!" The middle-aged cultivator roared ferociously. But no one responded to him. "Do it!" The middle-aged cultivator roared at the cultivator in red. "Why me?" The cultivator in red was not having it. "If I tell you to do it, then do it. I am the senior brother. You have to listen to me," the middle-aged cultivator said angrily. "Listen to you? Go to hell!" The cultivator in red was also furious. This guy actually wanted to push him to his death. "If you want to die, then die by yourself. Don't drag me down with you," the cultivator in red said and became one with his sword. He turned into a blood-colored sword light and soared into the sky, trying to escape. "You!" The middle-aged cultivator was furious when he heard that. But in the next moment, he was stunned by the scene before him. He saw a huge hand grabbing down from the sky, directly grabbing the blood-colored sword light. This. Chapter 3560. In the central continent, a nameless small city was destroyed. Almost all the mortals in the city were killed. These people did not even spare the old, the young, the women, and the children. In the central square of the small city, there was an altar that was more than 30 feet tall. Almost all the energy essence of the mortals in the city was devoured by the altar. Some evil cultivators took advantage of the chaos in the central continent, and used such a vicious method to collect the energy essence of mortals. This touched the reverse scale of Gu Fei's doppelganger. He had always valued mortals and would never allow these people who slaughtered mortals to continue living in this world. There were dozens of mortals kneeling around the blood-colored altar. These mortals were terrified. They did not dare to raise their heads and were extremely terrified. However, at this moment, a 5 or 6-year-old child stood out and pointed at the 3 evil cultivators on the altar, calling them bad guys. One of the red-clad cultivators had wanted to use a silver needle to kill off the child. However, Gu Fei's clone had taken action and used the red-clad cultivator's silver needle to kill off the red-clad cultivator. These people were not even immortals. How dare they kill a city of mortals to collect their energy essence? Who are you? If you don't come out, I'm going to start killing people. The middle-aged cultivator roared at the top of his lungs. His face was ferocious, and his eyes were filled with madness. Suddenly, the other cultivator in red, who had fused with the blood-colored sword, charged up into the sky in an attempt to flee. However, a great hand grasped down from the sky to grab the incomparably sharp, blood-colored sword light. The big hand tightened and the sword light in the big hand shattered. A scream came from the big hand. In the next moment, the cultivator in red turned into a cloud of blood mist. Both his body and spirit were destroyed. The middle-aged cultivator was so frightened by this scene that he collapsed onto the altar. In the next moment, a figure appeared on the altar silently. Who are you? The Holocaust sect has no enmity with you. Why did you kill our people? The middle-aged man's voice trembled. I'm going to kill all of you. Blood Holocaust sect, right? Later on, I'm going to destroy this sect. Gu Fei's doppelganger stared coldly at the guy who was paralyzed on the ground and said such words. What Holocaust sect? Just by hearing the name, one could tell that it wasn't a good thing. What? The middle-aged cultivator was left dumbfounded by the words of Gu Fei's clone. Just who is this fellow? Could he be one of the legendary divine masters? Gu Fei's doppelganger didn't waste any more words with this fellow. A beam of divine light shot out from his glabella and directly rushed into the middle-aged cultivator's glabella. In the next moment, Gu Fei's clone directly read the middle-aged cultivator's memories. Under the godly seizing secret technique, the middle-aged cultivator had no secrets to speak of in front of him. Blood Holocaust sect. The eyes of Gu Fei's doppelganger turned cold. In the next moment, the middle-aged cultivator's eyes suddenly lost their luster, and he fell head first onto the altar. With just a thought, Gu Fei's doppelganger killed the guy from Holocaust sect. A beam of divine light rushed out from the middle-aged cultivator and entered his body. Are you a good person? Just as Gu Fei's doppelganger was about to leave, a childish voice was heard from below the altar. Gu Fei's doppelganger lowered his head and saw a 5 or 6-year-old boy with white teeth and red lips looking at him. This boy's muscles and bones were not bad. Gu Fei's doppelganger waved his hand and the boy flew up from the ground and landed on the altar. Little guy, follow me, Gu Fei's doppelganger said to the boy. Are you a good person? The boy continued to ask as he looked at Gu Fei's doppelganger innocently. Gu Fei's doppelganger thought for a while and said, I don't know if I'm a good person, but I'm definitely not a bad person. The bad guys took my grandfather away. Brother, can you help me find my grandfather? The boy looked at Gu Fei's doppelganger and said, Let me try. Gu Fei's doppelganger performed the godly seizing secret technique again and read the boy's memories. Then, he was silent. The boy's grandfather wasn't taken away, but he was blasted into a cloud of blood mist and died tragically. The boy and his grandfather depended on each other in the city. They didn't expect that the evil cultivators would suddenly take advantage of the chaos in the central continent and kill their way into the city. Apart from the dozens of mortals kneeling around the altar, everyone else was killed by the 3 evil cultivators. The essence of those mortals was all devoured by the blood-colored altar. Gu Fei's doppelganger pointed a finger at the boy's forehead. Then, the boy had a dream. In the dream, his grandfather told him to learn from his master so that he could defeat the bad guys in the future. This dream was extremely real. The boy smiled in his sleep. This was the only thing Gu Fei could help the boy with. He didn't have the ability to bring the dead back to life, so it was impossible for him to find the boy's deceased grandfather. Gu Fei's doppelganger then took the sleeping boy into his inner world. Then, he took a step and instantly arrived high in the sky. He stretched his right hand down, and the blood-colored altar on the ground flew up. It quickly shrunk and fell into his hand. Such a sect could no longer exist in this world if they used such a method to obtain essence. Gu Fei's doppelganger directly disappeared into the void. After Gu Fei disappeared for a while, the mortals kneeling on the ground dared to raise their heads. They all looked around in disbelief. "Ha ha, I didn't die!" A middle-aged man was ecstatic and laughed crazily. As he laughed, tears flowed down his face. His relatives were all dead, and he was the only one left. The others also woke up from the ecstasy of escaping death. Some were crazy, some were crying, and some were giggling as if they had become stupid. Those who survived were actually more upset than those who had died. They had all lost their loved ones. No one knew the pain better than they did. The evil cultivators could kill the innocent indiscriminately and were unscrupulous. These cultivators had already embarked on a ruthless path and had lost the emotions that humans should have. At this time, on a mountain ridge 300 miles away from the city, a palace stood on the top of the mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there was a horizontal plaque on the archway of the gate. The words Holocaust Sect were written on it. In the mountain gate, there were many cultivators in red robes walking around. In the palace on the mountain peak, there was a strong aura. It was an extremely evil aura. Why hasn't Wu Tu and the others returned yet? Is it difficult to collect the essence of 10,000 mortals? In a courtyard in the mountain gate, an old man was talking to himself. The subordinates of Bloodhand Massacre God are all trash? The old man sighed and said. At this moment, a blood-colored altar suddenly descended from the sky. With a boom, it landed directly in front of the black-robed old man. The old man lifted his head and saw a young man in black standing on the blood-colored altar. "You!" The old man in black was shocked. This person could enter the mountain gate of Holocaust Sect silently. He was definitely not a weakling. The old man's forehead started to sweat. "Those three guys are your subordinates?" Gu Fei's doppelganger stood on the blood-colored altar and stared coldly at the old man in black. The murderous aura on the old man was so strong that it was almost visible to the naked eye. "So what if they are?" the old man in black said with a solemn expression. In the next moment, he waved his right hand and dozens of black lights flew out from his hand and shot towards the figure on the blood-colored altar. This was an extremely evil magic treasure in Holocaust Sect. It was called the Black Demon Needle. As long as one was pierced by the Black Demon Needle, even a little bit of skin or hair would cause one to die. Even if one was as strong as an immortal spirit, one would turn into a pool of blood and die after being pierced by the Black Demon Needle. However, Gu Fei's doppelganger was not an immortal spirit, but an existence that was many times stronger than an immortal spirit. He did not move at all, and the dozens of black lights flew back and pierced through Bloodhand Massacre God's body. Dozens of black fiend needles shot into the ground behind Bloodhand God Slaughter, and the ground immediately turned pitch black. "What?" Bloodhand Massacre God lowered his head and looked at the wound on his body in disbelief. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say anything and fell to the ground. Black, viscous blood flowed from his body. The Bloodhand Godslaughter had never imagined that he would die to the black fiend divine needles he had refined himself. In just a few breaths' time, the Holocaust Sect's elder, Sanguine Massacre, turned into a pool of blood and disappeared from this world completely. At this moment, no one in Holocaust Sect had noticed that Gu Fei's doppelganger had barged into the mountain gate of Holocaust Sect. Gu Fei's doppelganger looked at the palace on the mountain peak. There was an evil aura as if an extremely evil demon was hiding inside. Without any hesitation, Gu Fei's doppelganger slammed his palm towards the palace on the mountain peak. Boom! The entire palace exploded with a loud bang. At this moment, all the disciples in Holocaust Sect were shocked by the scene on the mountain peak. "What's going on?" "The Ancestral Hall," Outside the mountain gate, a disciple of Holocaust sect looked at the rising dust on the mountain peak and was shocked. At this moment, a figure rushed out from the ancestral hall. Endless evil aura exploded from this figure, as if a peerless evil lord had been born. Roar! The figure let out a roar and pounced down the mountain. An extremely powerful force burst out and pressed down on Gu Fei's doppelganger. I didn't expect a half-saint to be hiding here, Gu Fei's doppelganger said with surprise. To him, a half-saint was like an ant and was not much stronger. However, to an ordinary cultivator, a half-saint was a supreme existence. Chapter 3561. Gu Fei's clone hadn't expected that the Bloodfiend sect would have a half-saint guarding it. He had thought that the Bloodfiend sect was just a small sect. However, a sect with a half-saint guarding it could no longer be considered a small sect. However, this was just Gu Fei's clone. Whether it was a small sect or a large sect, it made no difference. Pow! Gu Fei's clone slapped the half-step saint's face, shattering the left side of the half-step saint's face. His teeth flew out of his mouth along with bloody foam. Boom! The corrupt path's half-step saint was sent flying, smashing through a pavilion before being buried under the rubble. Dust filled the air. Roar! In the next moment, a furious roar rang out, and a tyrannical evil energy exploded out. With a boom, countless rocks and bricks were blown away by the explosive force. The half-saint soared into the sky, directly attacking Gu Fei's clone. He extended his right hand, and 5 rays of blood-colored light shot out of his hand, piercing through Gu Fei's clone. Gu Fei's clone spat out a breath of air, and those 5 rays of blood-colored light immediately dissipated. What? The half-saint was indescribably shocked. This fellow had actually blown away his blood-colored fiend light with a single breath. How was that possible? His opponent's strength had surpassed his expectations. He only felt a gust of wind blow at him, and his face felt like it was being cut by a knife. In the next moment, the half-saint felt like he had been struck by a sledgehammer. He flew back, the sound of bones breaking coming from his body. The half-saint coughed up a mouthful of blood in midair. You're just an insignificant half-saint, but you dare to gather mortal essence to cultivate? Count yourself unlucky to run into me today. Gu Fei's clone's expression was incomparably icy. He took a step forward, instantly catching up to the half-saint, and then his foot landed on his chest. Bam! Gotcha! His throat was blocked by blood, and he couldn't even let out a scream. He fell from the sky like a meteor. Boom! The ground shook and dust flew into the air. The evil past half-step saint had smashed a huge crater in the ground. At this moment, the disciples of the Holocaust sect were already scared silly by this scene. They only recovered from the shock when the demonic path's half-saint fell to the ground. The Holocaust sect's disciples immediately dispersed, and all of them turned around to escape. There was nothing more precious than life. If they died, they would have nothing. No one wanted to die, especially those vicious and evil people. Trying to escape? Gu Fei's clone smiled coldly. Then, a ball of divine light appeared in his hand. This ball of divine light soared into the sky and suddenly exploded in midair. Countless golden lights immediately shot out in all directions and instantly pierced through all the Holocaust sect's disciples who were escaping. Those disciples of the Holocaust sect died just like that. They were instantly killed by Gu Fei's clone. After that, Gu Fei's attention fell on the semi-saint of the evil path. At this moment, the half-saint was in an extremely sorry state. There wasn't a clean spot on his body, and he looked more like a beggar than a beggar. Who the hell are you? The half-saint was heavily injured, and he was constantly coughing up blood. He viciously stared at Gu Fei's clone, as if he wanted to pounce on Gu Fei's clone. You can die now. As Gu Fei's clone spoke, he immediately attacked. Boom! A muffled sound resounded, and then the half-saint's figure completely disappeared. Gu Fei's doppelganger didn't want to play with this guy anymore. He directly killed the demonic path's demonic sage. In the next moment, he appeared in the sky. With just a simple attack, The entire Holocaust sect was completely erased from the map by a powerful force. After destroying the Holocaust sect, he directly left. Soon, Gu Fei's clone arrived on a grassland that stretched as far as the eye could see. At this moment, the sound of fighting came from the grassland. Gu Fei's clone directly rushed towards the source of the sound. Soon, he arrived near the grassland, and saw that there were two camps fighting fiercely. Boom! With a muffled sound, Gu Fei's clone descended from the sky and landed in the middle of the battlefield. A surge of energy was transmitted from his feet into the ground. The ground immediately shook violently like a wave. In the battlefield of tens of thousands of people, everyone only felt their feet shaking, and they couldn't stand steadily. Some people even directly sat on the ground. Rumble! Muffled sounds came from the ground like muffled thunder. This was an incomparably shocking scene. Tens of thousands of people simultaneously fell to the ground. Gu Fei's clone actually used his own strength to stop tens of thousands of people from fighting. This kind of method was really shocking, and all the cultivators who saw this scene were indescribably shocked. All of you stop! Gu Fei's clone shouted loudly. His voice wasn't loud, but it reached the ears of tens of thousands of people. Who are you? A general walked out. When he saw the appearance of Gu Fei's clone, he was startled. How could this guy be so young? Who I am isn't important. If you don't want to die, hurry up and scram. Gu Fei's clone said disdainfully. You! Hearing this, that general was instantly enraged. He actually directly stepped in front of Gu Fei's clone, and then directly slashed his sword at Gu Fei's clone's head. Gu Fei's clone directly raised his hand and grabbed the long sword that was slashing down. What? Seeing this scene, that general was really shocked. He wanted to pull back his longsword, but he found that the longsword seemed to have grown roots in his opponent's hand. No matter how the general mobilized his strength, he still couldn't get his sword back. Clang! As soon as Gu Fei's clone exerted force, the longsword immediately shattered. The broken pieces of the longsword shot at the general's body, but they almost pierced through the general's body, causing him to suffer a great impact and almost die. All of you scram! Gu Fei's clone roared, his voice deafening. Everyone was dumbfounded. Tens of thousands of people all looked at Gu Fei's clone, and everyone's forehead was dripping with sweat. Someone cried out, and then tens of thousands of people began to flee. The entire grassland was filled with the silhouettes of humans. Gu Fei's clone didn't say anything. He directly soared into the sky and disappeared into the void. He left the grassland and arrived in front of a city. The city had also turned into ruins, and a bloody smell surged into the nose of Gu Fei's clone. Needless to say, this was the work of cultivators. It should be known that there were many more mortals in the city than cultivators, but when cultivators fought, the destructive power was also shocking. Gu Fei's doppelganger directly walked into the city and saw corpses lying on the ground everywhere on the streets. These were the corpses of mortals. Damn it! Gu Fei's clone was infuriated. At this time, a scream came from the back of the city, and in the next moment, Gu Fei's clone disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already at the back of the city. He saw several cultivators fighting for a relic. These guys! Chapter 3562. Cultivators slaughtering mortals was a great taboo in the righteous path, but evil cultivators didn't have any scruples. In order to obtain great power, evil cultivators would do anything. Even if they had to slaughter the essence of all living beings, they wouldn't hesitate. The reason why evil cultivators were evil cultivators was because they had slaughtered too many people. They acted recklessly and disregarded the lives of all living beings. They were self-centered and free. Rumble! Inside the city, 5 God Realm experts were fighting. The white-clothed sword god was extremely powerful. The sword light from his body soared for thousands of meters, forcing the other 4 God Realm experts into a sorry state. Clang! A middle-aged man with a ferocious expression took out a divine bell and blocked the green sword light. Another sword mark was left on the divine bell. At this time, there were no other living beings in the city. All of them had turned into dried corpses, their essence, chi, and soul completely devoured. Gu Fei's clone was enraged at this scene. He thought, "These guys can't be left alive." However, he didn't directly take action. He hid himself and watched from the side. The sword cultivator's cultivation was not bad. With a sword in hand, the four God Realm experts kept retreating. If it wasn't for the four God Realm experts working together, they would have been killed by the white-clothed sword god. "Shimini Jian, hand over the heavenly god tool and we'll spare your life," the middle-aged man controlling the bronze bell said with a ferocious expression. "That's right, hand over the heavenly god tool quickly," another tall and thin guy, who looked like a bamboo pole, said with a grin. A long black rope rushed out of his hand and turned into a black snake that coiled around the white-clothed sword god. That sword god called Shimenijian seemed to have transformed into a heavenly sword. With a slash, that black rope transformed into a black snake was chopped into two. What? When the skinny man saw this, he was truly shocked. After all, that was a high-quality god artifact that he had obtained, yet it had been cut in half by a single slash. After the sword light cut through the black snake, its momentum did not decrease, and it directly slashed toward the thin man. The skinny man turned pale with fright. Without thinking, he bent over and rolled away, dodging the attack. Although he was in a sorry state, he wasn't killed by Shimenijian's sword light. "The four of you want to get the heavenly god tool?" Shimenijian said with a sneer, his face filled with disdain. Rumble. At this moment, a huge golden hand descended from the sky, directly slapping towards Shimenijian. A formidable power spread out, sealing the space around Shimenijian. The leader of the four great evil gods made his move. Boss attack was naturally extraordinary, but Shimenijian wasn't someone to be trifled with. He used god and sword as one and directly broke through the golden palm. What? When the other three demonic gods saw this, they couldn't help but be shocked. Could it be that even their boss couldn't suppress this fellow? At this time, the demonic god boss had already started fighting with Shimenijian, but very quickly, the demonic god boss' arm was cut off by Shimenijian. "You three bastards, if you don't come and help me, I'll kill you!" The demonic god boss was in so much pain that his face was distorted. Although his arm was cut off by Shimenijian, this wasn't the most serious thing. The most serious thing was that the sword chi had already invaded his body. Shimenijian's sword chi was no small matter. The demonic god boss life force was constantly being eroded by the sword chi. He could only crazily urge the energy in his body to force out the sword chi that had invaded his body. The other three demonic gods turned pale with fright and hurriedly rushed forward. Buzz! The sound of a sword rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. The four great evil gods were all injured by Shimenijian's sword chi. "The four great evil gods are only SOSO," Shimenijian said disdainfully. "The four great evil gods?" Gu Fei's doppelganger, who was hiding on the side, muttered to himself. Could it be that these four fellows had killed all the mortals in the city? Although Shimenijian wasn't a good person, he wasn't the kind of person who would kill the innocent. "Four symbols formation!" The four great evil gods joined hands, and their powerful energy gathered together, transforming into a giant elephant that rushed towards Shimenijian. It was as if a real divine elephant had appeared in the void. However, Shimenijian only needed one sword strike to split the giant elephant's shadow in half. "Sublimation in battle," Gu Fei's doppelganger muttered to himself. This Shimenijian had actually comprehended a deeper level of sword Dao power while fighting with others. Shimenijian's sword Dao power was constantly increasing, and in this way, the four great evil gods were out of luck. Especially the demonic god boss, his expression changed greatly. He knew that it was impossible for them to defeat Shimenijian. The four great evil gods didn't care about the heavenly god tool anymore. Then, as if they had an agreement, they simultaneously turned around and fled. The four great evil gods simultaneously fled in four different directions. Seeing this, Shimenijian couldn't help but be shocked. He could only chase after one evil god. Shimenijian didn't think too much and directly chased after the demonic god boss. Preposterous! Seeing this, the demonic god boss's face turned green, and he desperately tried to escape. His arm that was cut off by Shimini Jian had already grown back. At this time, without any warning, the demonic god boss's divine body unexpectedly exploded with a bang sound, turning into a cloud of blood mist. In an instant, both his body and soul were destroyed. What? Seeing this scene, Shimini Jian was immediately dumbfounded. What the hell is going on? Shimini Jian muttered to himself, his voice trembling. The demonic god boss was not an ordinary divine realm expert, but someone actually directly killed him. At this time, miserable screams could be heard, and the other three great evil gods unexpectedly met the same fate. Their divine bodies directly shattered into a cloud of blood mist, their bodies and souls destroyed, and their Tao dissipated. Who the hell is it? Shimini Jian was quite frightened. He actually didn't see who killed the four great evil gods. This also showed that the person who secretly attacked them was very powerful. The person who could instantly kill the four great evil gods, naturally could only be Gu Fei's doppelganger. With Shimini Jian's cultivation, it was impossible for him to sense the existence of Gu Fei's doppelganger. Who are you looking for? A voice suddenly rang out behind Shimini Jian. This time, Shimini Jian was really shocked. He fiercely turned around, but he didn't see anything. However, there was a vague figure behind his back. Who the hell are you? Shimini Jian's expression changed greatly. The Shimin clan is considered a strong clan in the central continent, but your cultivation is really too weak. The voice continued to ring out behind Shimini Jian. Shimini Jian turned pale with fright. The person's cultivation was definitely far above his. That person was clearly behind him, but he couldn't see this person at all. Who are you, senior? Shimini Jian's voice became humble. An existence with such a cultivation level was definitely an existence of the heavenly god realm, not someone an ordinary minor god could compare to. He would never have imagined that the other party was not a heavenly god, but one of the strongest existences in the entire ancestral god realm. Are you interested in becoming my disciple? Gu Fei's doppelganger had the intention to accept him as a disciple. Shimini Jian came from the Shimin clan, a cultivation clan of the central continent. Although it couldn't compare to the Pang clan and the Heavenly Fire clan, it was still an influential force in the central continent. Before the central continent war broke out, both the Pang clan and the Heavenly Fire clan wanted to rope in the Shimin clan. Hearing that the mysterious expert actually wanted to accept him as a disciple, Shimini Jian couldn't help but be surprised and happy. To be chosen by this senior, this was his good fortune. However, he also needed to know who the other party was before he could take him as a disciple. Seeing that Shimini Jian didn't say anything, Gu Fei's doppelganger couldn't help but nod inwardly. Shimini Jian was very cautious. He couldn't just randomly take someone as a disciple. You're very careful, Gu Fei's doppelganger said. Many thanks, senior, for thinking so highly of me, but I need to know who senior is before I can decide whether to take you as a disciple or not, Shimini Jian said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. After saying that, he slowly turned around and a black-clothed youngster immediately appeared in front of him. This black-clothed youngster's appearance was much younger than him. Little guy, my name is Gu Fei, Gu Fei's doppelganger said to Shimini Jian with a smile. What, senior is Gu Fei? Hearing this, Shimini Jian was truly shocked. Gu Fei's famous name, it was likely that all the cultivators in the entire ancestral god realm had heard of this name before. As the successor of the Shimin clan, Shimini Jian had also heard of this name before. What, are you willing to take me as a disciple? Gu Fei's doppelganger said to Shimini Jian with a smile. Yes, this junior is very willing. Shimini Jian hurriedly cowed out to Gu Fei's doppelganger. Being able to take Gu Fei as a disciple was something that Shimini Jian did not even dare to dream of. How could he miss out on such a good opportunity? Gu Fei had made a huge name for himself in the East continent. Everything he did was a major event that could shake the entire ancestral god realm. For such a person to take him as a disciple, Shimini Jian's ancestral grave must be emitting green smoke. Shimon Jian directly paid his respects to Gu Fei's doppelganger as a disciple. Gu Fei's doppelganger searched his body for a while, then took out a sword. This was a holy sword, and the aura that spread out from the holy sword made Shimon Jian's heart palpitate. Master doesn't have anything good to give you, so I'll give you a holy sword. I hope that you will cultivate well and become a sword saint in the future, Gu Fei said as he handed the holy sword in his hand to Shimon Jian. Holy sword? Shimon Jian was shocked to hear this. Master actually gave him a holy sword? Was he dreaming? A holy sword was many times better than any heavenly god weapon. Although Shimon Jian's Shimon clan was a powerful clan in the central continent, they did not have many holy weapons. A holy weapon was definitely the most precious treasure of the Shimon clan. Shimon Jian's hands trembled as he received the holy sword from Gu Fei's doppelganger, but his heart was in turmoil. Thank you, Master! Chapter 3563. Gu Fei's doppelganger accepted Shimon Jian as his disciple because Shimon Jian had defeated the 4 demonic gods and displayed his talent in the way of the sword. Under Gu Fei's guidance, Shimon Jian would soon become a true expert in the way of the sword. He was extremely excited to be able to become Gu Fei's disciple. One had to know that Gu Fei was a famous savage in the ancestral god realm, and he had nearly exterminated the Golden Crow clan of the East Continent. Even though the Golden Crow ancestor had returned, he was unable to lead the Golden Crow clan to rise again, nor was he able to defeat the Chaos Golden Rock clan and take back the #1 ancestral bloodline in the East Continent. Not long ago, the Chaos Golden Rock clan supported by Gu Fei had defeated the Golden Crow clan and unified the entire East Continent. This news quickly spread throughout the ancestral god realm. Even the Skyfire clan, a super force of the central continent, had suffered a setback at the hands of Gu Fei and could do nothing to Gu Fei. At this time, the Skyfire clan was defeated by the Pang clan. The ancestor of the Skyfire clan retreated in defeat and never appeared again. Shimon Jian becoming Gu Fei's disciple was a good thing for the Shimon clan. Is the central continent in chaos? Gu Fei's doppelganger asked Shimon Jian. Shimon Jian hurriedly replied, Master, according to the Shimon clan's observation, the central continent has already fallen into chaos. I believe it will soon affect the entire ancestral god realm. The Shimon clan was also very powerful in the central continent, but they had never intervened in any of the battles and had always been watching from the sidelines. But now, in order to protect themselves, the Shimon clan had already recalled their experts outside and activated the ancestral ground's protective array, forbidding the clan's disciples from going out. At this time, apart from Shimon Jian, there were really only a few disciples of the Shimon clan still walking around outside. Is that so? Gu Fei's doppelganger was not surprised. It should be known that the central continent was different from the East Continent. The central continent was much larger than any of the other regions, and there were many cultivation sects in the central continent. The number of cultivators in the central continent was more than the number of cultivators in the other 4 continents combined. However, most of the forces in the central continent had already joined either the Skyfire clan or the Pang clan. Hence, the entire central continent was in chaos. Although the Skyfire clan had been defeated by the Pang clan, the forces loyal to the Skyfire clan were unwilling to accept the fact that they had been defeated. They continued to fight against the Pang clan. In addition, some cultivators from other regions had entered the central continent. The entire cultivation world of the central continent could be said to be a mix of good and bad people. Those evil cultivators took advantage of the situation and collected the essence of mortals. The forces from the other regions of the ancestral god realm had already begun to invade the central continent. At this time, the Pang tribe was facing huge pressure from all sides. The western continent's army was blocked by the Pang tribe's troops, but the southern continent's army was like a dagger that stabbed into the eastern continent's land. When the Pang clan sent experts to stop the army of South State, the army of South State had already conquered an area of tens of thousands of miles in Zhongzhou State and successfully gained a foothold in Zhongzhou State. The southern continent's army was overseen by South State's #1 expert, Nan Batian, and they managed to repel the experts sent by the Pang tribe one after another. This shocked the entire Pang tribe. The Pang tribe had just fought a great battle with the Skyfire clan and their vitality had yet to recover. Naturally, they did not want to become enemies with a peerless expert like Nanbatian. However, the Pang tribe was unwilling to watch Nanbatian occupy such a large area. The current central continent was a piece of fat meat that everyone was drooling over. Everyone wanted to take a bite. However, the Pang tribe was a superpower in the central continent. Not everyone was qualified to take a bite of this fat meat. Through the Shimin clan's intelligence network, Gu Fei's clone learned of the current situation in the central continent. Chaos has arisen. Gu Fei's clone's expression was very solemn. The ancestral god realm was about to descend into chaos. This was just the beginning. Next, the ancestral god realm would enter an era of turmoil and darkness. Of course, this was nothing to Gu Fei, who was just a passerby in the ancestral god realm. However, he knew that it was not only the ancestral god realm that would descend into chaos. The human realm and the heavenly realm would also descend into chaos. At that time, if all the major worlds were to descend into chaos, countless living beings would die because of it. Is Nanbatian very strong? Gu Fei's clone and Shiminijian appeared in another city. This place was very peaceful. There was no killing. It was simply a paradise. However, this city was still controlled by the forces of the cultivation world. This was one of the countless cities controlled by the Pang tribe. This city was not big. Gu Fei's clone and Shiminijian were walking on the main street. The streets were filled with people and shops lined both sides of the street. It was very lively. Nanbatian is known as the #1 expert in the South Continent. His cultivation is absolutely powerful. This is undeniable, Shiminijian said with a solemn expression. The #1 expert in the South Continent? Interesting. Gu Fei's clone heard this and smiled. He did not say anything. With his current cultivation, as long as there were no extreme supremes, the South Continent was his. He was also a little curious about how powerful this #1 expert in the South Continent was. When Shiminijian saw Gu Fei's clone pondering, he could not help but think, could it be that Master wants to meet this #1 expert in the South Continent? Thinking of this, Shiminijian could not help but feel a little excited. It should be known that to him, a battle between experts of this level was definitely something that could only be encountered by chance. Nanbatian had been famous for a long time. No one could replace him as the #1 expert in the South Continent. He was the commander of the South Continent's army. Let's go! Gu Fei's clone did not say anything else. He directly left the city with Shiminijian. He wanted to go to a big city and use the teleportation array there to rush back to the East Continent. Since the ancestral god realm was already in chaos, why not let the Chaos Golden Rock clan become the ruler of the ancestral god realm? Even if the Chaos Golden Rock clan could not become the ruler of the ancestral god realm, they could at least become one of the strongest forces in the ancestral god realm. When Gu Fei's clone thought of this, he immediately decided to support Sun Kei's fight for hegemony. He believed that Sun Kei was also feeling anxious. Without his support, Sun Kei wouldn't be able to do anything. Shimin City was a city named after the Shimin clan. This city was a super city, and there were tens of millions of living beings living in the city. Even in the entire central continent, there were only a dozen super cities inhabited by millions of living beings. The central continent was the world of the human race, but there were also many other races. Those large races such as the Treant race, Roaring Firmament Wolf race, Heavenly Ant race, etc. The number of these races was absolutely shocking. The Treant race was even spread throughout the 5 major continents of the ancestral god realm. However, only humans would build cities. Creatures of other races wouldn't normally build cities. Instead, they would simply live together. The Heavenly Ant race lived underground. At noon, Gu Fei's clone and Shiminijian arrived outside the city gates of Shimin City. Is this the Shimin clan city? Gu Fei's clone glanced at Shiminijian and asked. That's right. This is a place of importance to the Shimin clan, second only to the ancestral land. Shimanijian said somewhat embarrassedly. He was the one who had tricked Gu Fei's clone to come here. He had to tell his clansmen that he had become Gu Fei's disciple. It should be known that this was a huge matter for the Shimin clan. Shimanijian's status in the Shimin clan was actually not high. He was only a god-grade sword god. In the Shimin clan, there were at least 7,000 or 8,000 god-grade young clansmen. Although he was a sword god, there were many people in the Shimin clan with a higher cultivation level than him. He had originally given up on competing for the position of the next patriarch. But now, he had changed his mind. He wanted to become the next patriarch of the Shimin clan. At this time, the tightly closed city gates of Shimin City slowly opened. Then, a group of people came out to welcome them. The person in the lead was a tall, thin, and sage-like cyan-robed old man. Behind the cyan-robed old man was a group of experts with powerful cultivation. When Shimanijian saw the cyan-robed old man in the lead, he couldn't help but be startled. He thought to himself, "How come even the city lord has come?" The old man in the lead was the city lord of Shimin City, Shimin Feng. This city lord of Shimin City was in existence on the same level as Shimanijian's granduncle. "City lord, how come you have personally come out?" Shimanijian hastily walked over and humbly greeted Shimin Feng. However, Shimin Feng didn't even glance at Shimanijian. Instead, he was very polite to Gu Fei's clone. He directly arrived in front of Gu Fei's clone. "Presumably, this must be Gu Fei." Shimin Feng, the city lord of Shimin City, said as he sized up Gu Fei's clone. "You are." Gu Fei's avatar naturally did not know what kind of person Shimin Feng, the city lord of Shimin City, was. "This one is Shimin Feng." Shimin Feng naturally wouldn't miss the opportunity to introduce himself in front of Gu Fei's clone. Then, he introduced all the important figures in the city to Gu Fei's clone. As for Shimanijian, he was forgotten by everyone in a corner. After that, Shimin Feng welcomed Gu Fei's clone into Shimin City and then went to the city lord's mansion. It had to be said that Shimin Feng's city lord's mansion was very good. It occupied a very large area and was built in a garden style. The density of spiritual qi in this city was not low. It was very suitable for cultivators to cultivate. In the city lord's mansion, everyone sat down. Shimin Feng sat on the throne high up in the main hall with a smile on his face. Being able to befriend Gu Fei made him feel like he was in a dream. It was incomparably real. "It is Shimanijian's honor to have Senior as his master." Shimin Feng smiled and glanced at Shimanijian, who was standing behind Gu Fei. At this time, everyone in the palace hall looked at Shimanijian with a different expression. This guy was simply a lucky bastard. One must know who Gu Fei was. He was a fierce god of the ancestral god realm. He was incomparably powerful. Chapter 3564. Ancestral God Realm, Central Continent. Shimin Feng sat on the throne in the Shimin clan's Shimin City. In front of Gu Fei's clone, Shimin Feng didn't dare to act presumptuously. Even the other experts of the Shimin clan were extremely nervous. The Shimin clan had actually formed a relationship with the vicious Gu Fei. This was something that the Shimin clan could never have imagined. One must know that Gu Fei's name had recently spread throughout the entire ancestral god realm. After chatting with Gu Fei's clone for an hour, Shimin Feng personally accompanied Gu Fei's clone to the place where guests were received. The back of the city lord's residence was lush and verdant. Many buildings were hidden by the trees. Very quickly, Shimin Feng brought Gu Fei's clone to the front of a courtyard. This courtyard had a beautiful environment, and the spiritual qi gathered here. This caused Gu Fei's clone to feel somewhat surprised. The place where the Shimin clan received their guests was actually so good. Gu Fei's clone stayed here temporarily. However, he had already sent a message to Gu Fei's real body. At this time, the Chaos Golden Rock clan's progenitor, Sun Ke, was busy again. He had made up his mind to conquer the central continent. He had already received news that the forces of the West Continent and South Continent had already taken action. The armies of the two continents had already entered the central continent. Under the leadership of Nan Batian, the South Continent's army was like a hot knife cutting through butter. They quickly conquered a large area and successfully gained a foothold in the central continent. The success of the South Continent's army had stimulated Tsang Quebec. He had already unified the East Continent. Logically speaking, apart from the Central Continent, the Central Continent should be ranked first among the forces of the other 4 continents. It should be known that all the forces of the East Continent were under Tsang Kei's control. Unlike the other continents didn't have a unified force. It seemed that the Chaos Golden Rock clan had an advantage that the forces of the other continents didn't have. Of course, what really made Tsang Kei determined to conquer the Central Continent was the news that Gu Fei's clone had sent back. The Eastern Continent was in chaos, and this was the perfect opportunity to fight for the ancestral god realm. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to unify the ancestral god realm. If they missed it, who knew how many years they would have to wait for another chance like this? However, Gu Fei was very clear that there was an invisible hand behind all of this. Perhaps the goal of this hand was to weaken the power of the ancestral god realm. Gu Fei's clone was in the Shimin city of the Central Continent's Shimin clan. The Shimin city of the Shimin clan was a super big city. If he joined hands with the Shimin clan, the chances of capturing the Central Continent would be much greater. Soon, Tsang Kei gathered the experts from the Earth Spirit clan, the Heavenly God clan, and the Mysterious Snake clan. Meanwhile, Gu Fei was still in seclusion in the Chaos Golden Rock clan's ancestral land. However, the Demon God and the Sword Slave had walked out of the Chaos Golden Rock clan's ancestral land. The Demon God and the Sword Slave were peerless experts whose cultivation was not inferior to Tsang Kei's. The Sword Slave was especially powerful and terrifying. He was a super ruthless person who achieved his Tao through killing. The Sword Slave was once a Sword Principle sovereign who created the Supreme Sword Principle, the 9 Heaven Punishment Swords. Once the 9 swords were used, who could fight against him? However, due to some reason, his cultivation had fallen from the Supreme Realm, but the Sword Slave's cultivation was still comparable to Tsang Kei's. Tsang Kei was extremely excited when Gu Fei sent out the Demon God and the Sword Slave. Tsang Kei was swift and decisive. In just 3 days, he had formed a 1,000,000-strong army. This was the combat power of the entire Eastern Continent. This was a war of gods. Only Tsang Kei could form a 1,000,000-strong army after unifying the Eastern Continent. On the morning of the 4th day, Tsang Kei sent out the vanguard army to directly enter the Central Continent through a pre-prepared passage. Soon, they occupied a medium-sized city. Under the leadership of the Golden Rock Goddess, the vanguard army quickly built a huge transmission array platform in the city. The 50,000-strong army defended the city like an iron bucket. The news of the Eastern Continent's Divine War Army entering the Central Continent spread quickly. The entire Central Continent was shaken, especially the Pang clan. The higher-ups of the Pang clan were extremely shocked because the thing they were most worried about had finally happened. The Chaos Golden Rock clan was not afraid of Tsang Kei, but they had to pay attention to the person behind Tsang Quebec. Without the support of that person, Tsang Kei would never dare to offend the Pang clan. One must know that the Pang clan had defeated the Sky Fire clan. All the forces that were attacking the Central Continent were snatching food from the Pang clan's mouth. The Pang clan had no scruples against the forces of the Western Continent and Southern Continent. They directly sent out an army to drive those guys out of the Central Continent. The forces of the Western Continent were driven back, but the forces of the Southern Continent were difficult to deal with. Nan Batian was a formidable person, so he naturally would not retreat easily. The 300,000-strong army of the Southern Continent was still confronting the 100,000-strong army of the Pang clan in the southern region of the Central Continent. They could attack the Pang clan's army at any time. The 3 old ancestors of the Pang clan had already set off to the southern region to stop Nan Batian's advance. However, at this critical juncture, the eastern region of the Central Continent faced another problem. The army of the Eastern Continent suddenly invaded the Central Continent and occupied Eastern Sky City. Eastern Sky City was a medium-sized city in the eastern region. There was a transmission array in the city that connected to the Eastern Continent, but it could only transport a few hundred people at a time. The Golden Rock Goddess and the 50,000-strong army of the Divine War Army had to use hundreds of transmission arrays to enter Eastern Sky City. After entering Eastern Sky City, the vanguard of the Eastern Continent's Divine War Army began to build a larger transmission array platform. In just a few hours, a huge formation platform that was 30 meters tall stood in the square in the middle of Eastern Sky City. This was a transmission array platform that could transport 30,000 people at a time. Even so, it would still take a lot of time for the million Divine War Army of the Eastern Continent to arrive. Rumble. Not long after the Golden Rock Goddess led the 50,000-strong army of the Divine War Army to build the transmission array platform, a thunderous sound came from afar. A black cloud flew over from afar, and the entire world turned dark. A flag fluttered in the black cloud. On the flag was embroidered the word Pang. The black cloud arrived in the sky above Eastern Sky City. A general stood on top of the cloud and looked down at Eastern Sky City. They came so quickly! The Golden Rock Goddess walked out of the City Lord's mansion of Eastern Sky City. She raised her head and looked at the black cloud in the sky. She couldn't help but frown. The army of the Pang clan had finally arrived. No matter who you are, go back to where you came from. A loud voice came from the sky and spread throughout the entire city. All the cultivators within a radius of 10,000 miles of Eastern Sky City heard this voice. At that moment, the 50,000-strong army of the Eastern Continent walked out of Eastern Sky City. A terrifying murderous aura immediately spread out from Eastern Sky City. The 50,000-strong Divine War Army of the Eastern Continent were not rookies. They were real seasoned veterans with cultivation levels above the divine level. The general who led them was even a divine king, or even a Shin king. As the commander of the 50,000-strong army, the Golden Rock Goddess was a quasi-supreme. Of course, her cultivation level was only at the beginner level of a quasi-supreme. She could not be compared to those at the profound level of a quasi-supreme. How arrogant! In Eastern Sky City, a middle-aged general stood up and grabbed the spear that was stuck in the ground. Both his feet stepped on the ground and directly shot up into the sky, arriving opposite the Pang clan's army. The Pang clan's army had a lot of people, at least 30,000. The commander was an ultimate god, but he was a realm lower than a quasi-supreme. An ultimate god was not even at the level of a great ancestor in the Pang clan. The middle-aged general from Eastern Continent was also an ultimate god from the Heavenly God clan. Kill! Without any superfluous words, the middle-aged general from the Heavenly God clan directly attacked a general in front of him with the spear in his hand. Kill! The general from the Pang clan also roared angrily and went up to the middle-aged general. Boom! The two figures collided with each other in an instant. Divine Way power exploded and blood light appeared. A figure rushed over and directly killed his way into the Pang clan's army opposite. What? The experts leading the troops of the Pang clan's army could not help but be shocked when they saw the scene. At that moment, the middle-aged general had already started a massacre in the Pang clan's army, leaving a path of blood wherever he went. Blood rain fell from the sky and the smell of blood permeated the void. The Golden Rock Goddess looked up at the scene in the sky calmly. Although the soldiers in Eastern Sky City seemed to be scattered all over the city, they were secretly in a battle formation. Once they attacked, they could immediately form a battle formation and rush out of Eastern Sky City. Rumble! High up in the sky, among the dark clouds, there was a thunderous sound. An extremely terrifying fluctuation spread out, and the sound of killing was heard in the dark clouds. What's going on? There were many cultivators cultivating in Eastern Sky City. Apart from the cultivators loyal to the Pang clan who were expelled from the city by the Golden Rock Goddess, the rest of the itinerant cultivators could still stay in the city. At that moment, the itinerant cultivators in the city were inexplicably shocked. The Divinity War had finally affected Eastern Sky City, which made the itinerant cultivators in the city terrified. One must know that their lives were very fragile in the face of a powerful existence. Once they were affected by the Divinity War, there would only be one outcome: death. Someone go help him! The Golden Rock Goddess glanced at the Divinity War army and said, I'm willing to go! As soon as the Golden Rock Goddess's voice fell, a divine general walked out. "All right. You go!" The Golden Rock Goddess waved her hand and said, "Yes." The divine general directly rushed into the sky and killed his way into the violently rolling dark clouds in the sky. The two divine generals had actually shaken the Pain Clan's army of 30,000. This shocked everyone who saw this scene. The East Continent's divine generals and divine soldiers were actually this powerful. Chapter 3565. An ultimate god battle general from the Heavenly God clan charged into the Pain Clan's army in the sky, shocking everyone who saw it. However, the Pain Clan's 30,000-strong army was not to be trifled with. Very soon, the Pain Clan's army had trapped the ultimate god in a battle formation. Rumble! Heaven and earth shook as terrifying energy fluctuations shook the void. High up in the sky, a mass of dark clouds spread out and covered the entire sky. Figures flashed in the dark clouds. The Pain Clan's army that had formed a battle formation displayed their extremely powerful combat strength. Just as the ultimate god-level battle general was about to be defeated, another powerful figure rushed out from Dongtian's city below. A sledgehammer directly bombarded from below. The sledgehammer instantly grew to the size of a mountain and emitted a terrifying aura as it directly smashed onto the Pain Clan's battle formation. Boom! With a loud bang, the dark clouds in the sky were dispersed. Dozens of Pain Clan soldiers instantly turned into clouds of blood mist. Their bodies and souls were instantly destroyed. What? The commander of the Pain Clan's army could not help but be furious when he saw that scene. He could not accept that so many of his 30,000-strong army had been killed by two warriors. The commander of the Pain Clan's army immediately commanded the battle formation. Countless Pain Clan soldiers rushed out, and the battle formation changed rapidly. Soon, another warrior who had rushed into the sky was trapped in the battle formation. Banners fluttered in the wind as battle cries shook the heavens and the earth. The battle formation formed by the Pain Clan soldiers was in operation. The two East Continent warriors who were trapped in the battle formation struggled left and right, but were unable to break out of the formation. Humph! Even a quasi-supreme expert would die if trapped in the formation, let alone you two little guys. An old voice sounded as the commander of the Pain Clan's army stared disdainfully at the two East Continent warriors trapped in the battle formation. In his eyes, the two East Continent warriors were already two corpses. Since those guys want to play, let's play with them. In Dongtian City, the Golden Rock Goddess stood up and rushed into the sky. She arrived high up in the sky and coldly looked at the battle formation opposite her. The battle formation formed by tens of thousands of people was indeed powerful. At this moment, the two East Continent warlords who were trapped in the battle formation could no longer hold on, and kept vomiting blood. It looked like he was about to die. At that moment, countless soldiers from the East Continent charged out of East Sky City and gathered behind the goddess. Very soon, an even more powerful battle formation appeared in the world. Kill! 50,000 East Continent soldiers roared at the same time, thrusting their spears forward at the same time. The strength of 50,000 soldiers converged and charged forward. What? Seeing this, the commander of the Pain Clan knew that they were in trouble. Boom! With a loud bang, the Pain Clan's army collapsed. The combined attack of 50,000 Pain Clan's army from the East Continent could even kill a quasi-supreme being. Therefore, the battle formation formed by 30,000 Pain Clan's army naturally couldn't withstand the combined attack of 50,000 Pain Clan's army. The battle formation formed by the Pain Clan's army collapsed. Countless Pain Clan soldiers shattered in the void and turned into clouds of blood mist. The void was immediately filled with the pungent smell of blood. All the cultivators who saw this were dumbfounded. It was just a single attack, but countless Pain Clan soldiers were slaughtered. Less than 1% of them survived. The surviving Pain Clan soldiers were scared out of their wits and fled in all directions. The commander of the Pain Clan's army was sent flying, coughing up blood continuously. It was obvious that he had suffered a great impact and was seriously injured. At this moment, The two East Continent warlords who were trapped in the battle formation took the opportunity to rush out. Kill! The two East Continent warlords charged at the commander of the Pain clan. The commander of the Pain clan was shocked. He could only bite the bullet and fight the two East Continent warlords. At this time, the Golden Rock Goddess led the 50,000 East Continent warriors and killed all the fleeing Pain clan warriors with the momentum of a strong gust of wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. The 30,000 Pain clan army was completely defeated by the Golden Rock Goddess's 50,000 East Continent warlords. A rain of blood poured down from the sky. The ground was dyed red, and even the soil was dyed red. Soon, the commander of the Pain clan was defeated by the two East Continent warlords. The news of the Pain clan's 30,000 deity army being annihilated spread and shook the entire eastern region of Central Continent. Countless cultivators were shocked. The guys from the East Continent were so powerful. This was a terrifying war between gods. The Pain clan was defeated. Without waiting for the main army to arrive, the Golden Rock Goddess led the 50,000 vanguard army to kill in all directions, continuously expanding their territory. They conquered 7 cities in a row and destroyed 2 sects that were loyal to the Pain clan. In this way, the East Continent's vanguard army had conquered a region. The Golden Rock Goddess led the army back to Eastern Sky City. At this time, it was already late. The Golden Rock Goddess led 50,000 soldiers to the square. Without hesitation, she activated the 10-feet-tall altar in the square. In the next moment, countless formation runes emerged from the altar. Rumble! The space above the altar began to vibrate. As the power of the formation continued to explode, a passage appeared in the space above the altar. Then, an incomparably powerful energy fluctuation was emitted from the passageway. Numerous figures walked out from the passageway above the altar. The main army of the East Continent was finally coming. The Golden Rock Goddess was extremely excited when she saw this. An hour later, 300,000 East Continent deity army soldiers arrived from the East Continent through the super teleportation formation. At this moment, in the Pain clan's ancestral land, the roars of the Pain clan's ancestor could be heard coming from an ancestral hall. Trash! All of you are trash! The Pain clan's ancestor was furious. The 30,000 deity army was annihilated just like that. No one could accept such an outcome. Ancestor, what should we do next? An old man stood up and bowed to Tsunkei on the throne. Those guys should go back to where they came from, the Pain clan's ancestor said impatiently. But... The old man wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he didn't say anything else. At this moment, following the Pain clan's ancestor's order, the most elite soldiers of the Pain clan began to wake up from their slumber. These soldiers were not ordinary. Rumble! As the soldiers of the Pain clan continued to awaken, an extremely powerful force quickly gathered. A terrifying aura spread out, causing the wild beasts in the mountains to behave. More than an hour later, countless figures soared into the sky from East Sky City and formed a battle formation above the city. The battle formation wasn't very big, but the energy ripples it emitted were enough to contend against the Quasi-Supreme. At this moment, the soldiers of the Pain clan charged over again. The countless figures were like stone tablets, emitting an aura that made people's hearts palpitate. The aura of a veteran soldier who had been through hundreds of battles was definitely different from the aura of an ordinary soldier. They're here again so soon? The Golden Rock Goddess was surprised, but there was nothing she could do. She could only lead the 50,000 soldiers and form a battle formation to fight against these guys. Kill! The Golden Rock Goddess let out a furious roar as she led the 50,000 warriors and charged forward. Boom! With a loud bang, the two battle formations collided with each other. Terrifying divine power ripples spread out, and the surrounding void was instantly annihilated. The Golden Rock Goddess was the first to bear the brunt of the impact. She was pushed back and a trail of blood seeped out from the corner of her mouth. The battle formation formed by the 50,000 soldiers of the East Continent shook violently as if it could collapse at any time. One after another, the heavenly fire soldiers shattered in the void and turned into clouds of blood mist, their bodies and souls destroyed. Many of the soldiers of the Pang clan died as well. At this moment, countless figures flashed in the sky and an even more intense divine battle broke out. Chapter 3566. The Pang clan was truly enraged this time. They actually used their trump card, the old soldiers that had not been mobilized for 100,000 years. Those old soldiers usually slept in the Earth ancestral vein in the depths of the Pang clan's ancestral land. The Earth ancestral vein condensed an endless amount of heaven and earth essence. The Pang clan's old soldiers had been sleeping in the Earth ancestral vein for 100,000 years. During those 100,000 years, their divine bodies were constantly nourished by the Earth ancestral vein's essence. One could imagine how powerful those old soldiers' divine bodies would become under the refinement of the Earth ancestral vein's essence. There were only 1,000 of these antique Pang clan's old soldiers. However, when they gathered together, they formed a battle formation that was even more powerful and terrifying than the Golden Rock Goddess's 50,000 East Continent soldiers. Rumble! The heaven and earth shook. Rays of dazzling divine light rushed out from the ancient soldiers' spears and pierced through the void. One by one, the East Continent's warriors were pierced by the divine light and fell from the sky. Although there was only a bloody hole on their bodies, the East Continent's warriors who were pierced by the divine light were already dead. Even their primordial spirits were destroyed. These guys are too strong. What should we do? An ultimate god general came to the Golden Rock Goddess's side and said with a solemn expression. His body was covered with blood and his armor was stained with blood. He looked a little embarrassed. The other Pang clan soldiers were still fine, but the 1,000 old soldiers were extremely powerful. The 1,000 old soldiers went on a rampage in the Golden Rock Goddess's battle formation. Countless formation patterns were shattered wherever they passed. The East Continent soldiers were pierced to death by their spears and fell from the sky. Many of the East Continent soldiers that fell from the sky directly smashed into Eastern Sky City below. However, a ball of divine light quickly rushed out from Eastern Sky City and instantly shrouded the entire Eastern Sky City. At that moment, there were still countless East Continent soldiers coming from the giant teleportation formation in Eastern Sky City. Soon, the entire Eastern Sky City was almost filled with East Continent soldiers. Boom! At this moment, an extremely powerful figure appeared in the sky above the teleportation formation. The moment he appeared, the space around him seemed to be sliced into countless fragments, as black spatial cracks appeared one after another. The sword slaves are here, haha! At this time, in the sky above Eastern Sky City, the Golden Rock Goddess sensed the shocking sword energy coming from Eastern Sky City and was overjoyed. The sword slave had already restrained his aura as much as possible, but the moment he appeared, everyone in Eastern Sky City felt a chill run down their spines. It was as if there was a sharp sword hanging over their heads that could fall at any time. At this moment, the Golden Rock Goddess could no longer hold on. The 1,000 veteran soldiers had already charged into her battle formation more than 10 times. Every time they charged, a large number of East Continent soldiers would be stabbed to death. After more than a dozen sprints, the Golden Rock Goddess's 50,000 vanguard divine army had almost all been killed. This was a one-sided massacre, and there was no way for them to retaliate. The divine reeds held by ordinary soldiers couldn't even pierce through the skin of a veteran soldier. This was the difference between an antique soldier and an ordinary soldier. Even the Golden Rock Goddess didn't dare to fight against these ancient weapons head-on. She had no choice but to retreat. Swoosh! A battle spear fell from the sky and directly nailed an ultimate god-level general in the void. Blurry divine runes appeared on the ancient battle spear. In the next moment, the spear flew up and landed in the hands of an antique veteran soldier. His ancient armor was covered in marks left behind by the weapon. It was definitely not a coincidence that these antique veteran soldiers were able to survive until now. These veteran soldiers had experienced thousands of battles and were still alive. Their combat experience was extremely rich. They were like a group of death gods that had walked out of hell. Wherever they passed, no one could stop them. Interesting. At this moment, The sword slave in Eastern Sky City raised his head and saw the scene. His eyes immediately lit up. The killing power emitted by the 1,000 Pang clan veteran soldiers could actually faintly contend against him. One should know that the sword slave was a fierce person who had entered the Tao through killing. He was a sword hero of his generation. The killing aura on his body could definitely be described as earth-shattering. Rumble! The heavens and earth shook. A terrifying killing aura descended from the sky. The 1,000 Pang clan veteran soldiers actually directly attacked Eastern Sky City from the sky. The sky above Eastern Sky City looked like it was about to collapse. The rogue cultivators in the city were already scared out of their wits. They were so terrified that even their souls were trembling. Boom! With a loud bang, the void above Eastern Sky City exploded. Black spatial cracks spread out in all directions like black abysses. Even the Golden Rock Goddess was shocked by this earth-shattering scene from afar. The 1,000 antique Pang clan veteran soldiers were really too powerful. The combat power displayed by the battle formation was even stronger than that of a peak quasi-supreme being. Such combat power could absolutely dominate the entire ancestral god realm in this era of great changes. It wasn't without reason that the antique war soldier was the trump card of the great clan. After 100,000 years, even a pig that was thrown into the earth ancestor vein would become a god, let alone the war soldier raised by the great clan. However, the battle formation formed by the 1,000 ancient soldiers was not able to break through the defensive formation of Eastern Sky City. However, the entire formation shook violently, as if it could collapse at any time. Countless runes emitted the most dazzling divine light. Every divine rune was releasing the most powerful waves of divine power. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw that the divine light above them had blocked the attack of the Pang clan's ancient soldiers. But in the next moment, the divine light above Dong Tian City suddenly split into a crack that was at least a dozen miles long. What? All the cultivators in Eastern Sky City were scared out of their wits. One must know that once the ancient soldiers of the Pang clan charged in, everyone would die. The ancient soldiers of the Pang clan were merciless. They were tools of slaughter. As long as they were enemies, they would kill them without any mercy. Just when all the cultivators in the city felt that a great disaster was about to befall them, a figure appeared high up in the sky. He was like a natural killing sword. Just by standing there quietly, he was able to intimidate the ancient soldiers. The ancient soldiers of the Pang clan stood quietly in the void. Through the battle formation, the power of the ancient soldiers was linked into a single line. Their auras overlapped, and the vast killing aura that spread out caused the world to lose its color. This is Chapter 3567. The sword slave made his move. With a single slash, he broke through the defensive formation of Eastern Sky City and appeared high up in the sky. A terrifying sword aura burst out from his body. He was like a natural-born killing sword. His murderous aura disrupted the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Everyone stared at the silhouette in the sky as they were shocked to the extreme. This was an extremely shocking scene. High up in the sky, there was a single person blocking 1,000 ancient warriors of the Pang clan with his own strength. The legendary extreme sword ancestor? The leader of the 1,000-men ancient battle formation stared at the sword slaves in front of him. His eyes suddenly emitted an extremely resplendent divine light. In the next moment, the entire 1,000-men ancient battle formation's aura suddenly rose by a huge level, causing the void to crack continuously. However, the sword slave who stood in front of the ancient battle formation felt like he was bathing in the spring breeze. He wasn't affected at all. The sword slave looked at the ancient warrior and suddenly laughed. "You have good eyesight. Since you know it's me, why don't you take your people and get out of here? So what if you're the extreme sword ancestor? In this world, you have to lower your head even if you're a true extreme sovereign," the ancient warrior said coldly. His tone was emotionless, as if all human emotions had disappeared from his body. Such a person was a true iron-blooded warrior. "Humph!" the sword slave sneered. "Then all of you can stay here. Kill!" The ancient warrior took the initiative. With a loud roar, the ancient battle formation was immediately activated. In an instant, the leading ancient warrior emitted an energy fluctuation that even the sword slave couldn't help but be shocked. Swish! In just an instant, the ancient warrior's spear had already pierced the sword slave's forehead with extreme speed. The sword slave didn't dodge. Just when the ancient warrior's spear was about to pierce the sword slave's forehead, a ball of divine light emerged from the sword slave's forehead and blocked the spear. What? That Gu war general was moved. This extreme Dao sword ancestor was indeed extraordinary. The power that erupted from his attack could even stab a peak quasi-supreme being to death with a single spear. Buzz! A sword hum resounded, and then a divine sword charged out from the center of the sword servant's forehead. The spear in Gu Zhan's hand instantly shattered. The divine sword that came out of the sword slave's glabella turned into an immortal sword light, and instantly pierced through Gu Zhan's divine body. How is this possible? The ancient general from the Pang clan looked down at the bloody hole in his chest in disbelief. In the next moment, he turned into dust and disappeared into the void. Kill! The thousands of ancient soldiers roared in unison and raised the spears in their hands at the same time. A terrifying divine force burst out from the formation and pierced through the sword slaves. The power of 1,000 ancient soldiers gathered together. The power of this attack was much stronger than the previous attack of the ancient general. Swoosh! The sword slave merely waved his hand, and the immortal sword light slashed forward. Everywhere the sword light passed, the void was instantly annihilated. The immortal sword light tore through the 1,000-man formation as easily as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It then split the entire formation in half. What? Everyone was dumbfounded. No one expected the sword slave to be so powerful. With just a single slash, he actually broke through the 1,000-man formation of the Pang clan's ancient soldiers. With just a single slash, close to 100 ancient soldiers died under the sword slave's immortal sword light. The experts from the Pang clan who were watching from afar felt their hearts bleeding. Those were ancient soldiers. How much effort and time did it take to nurture an ancient soldier? Retreat! A roar came from afar. Then, a figure appeared in the sky. The pressure of a quasi-supreme expert could be felt. That person merely took a step and was already near them. Humph! Do you think you can leave? The sword slave said in disdain. After that, he waved his sword again. An immortal sword ray shot out from his hand. Wherever the sword ray passed by, the incomparably powerful ancient weapons would shatter into clouds of blood mist. The blood mist would then dissipate into the air. The ancient soldiers that were swept by the immortal sword light were instantly destroyed. After the formation was broken, the ancient soldiers were still calm. They then formed another battle formation and wanted to fight against the sword slave. But in the next moment, the immortal sword light slashed and the battle formation collapsed. That was because the ancient soldiers that formed the battle formation had lost another 100 people. You! The quasi-supreme expert from the Pang clan couldn't help but be enraged when he saw this. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed towards the sword slave. Without any suspense, another immortal sword light flashed. In the next moment, a bloody scar appeared on the forehead of the quasi-supreme expert. Under everyone's incomparably shocked gaze, the palm of the quasi-supreme expert and his entire body were split into two, falling from the sky. An incomparably powerful quasi-supreme expert was killed by the sword slave just like that. Too powerful. Seeing this scene from afar, the golden rock goddess couldn't help but be indescribably shocked. The sword slave's swordsmanship cultivation seemed to be even more terrifying. This wasn't an extreme power, but it could easily kill a quasi-supreme expert. While everyone was still in shock, the sword slave attacked again. Then, the tables turned. The ancient battle formation was broken, and although the ancient soldiers were defeated, they were not in a mess. However, the sword slave didn't care if they were in a mess or not. If they were in a mess, they would still be killed. The immortal sword light flashed continuously, and every time it flashed, an ancient soldier would be killed. In just a dozen breaths' time, the ancient soldiers sent out by the Pang clan were all killed by the sword slave. This scene caused everyone to be dumbfounded. After the sword slave killed the ancient soldiers, he directly returned to Dongtian City. Even after his figure disappeared for a long time, countless people were still in a state of shock. The news of the defeat of the Pang clan's ancient soldiers quickly spread to the ancestral land of the Pang clan. The Pang clan's old ancestor even smashed the table with his palm. "What's going on? Who can tell me what happened?" The Pang clan's old ancestor's roar came from the ancestral hall. The higher-ups of the Pang clan in the ancestral hall all kept quiet out of fear, not daring to speak. Not only was the Pang clan stunned by this news, even the other forces of the central continent were indescribably shocked. Those fellows from the east continent were actually so powerful that they could defeat the ancient soldiers of the Pang clan? Some K from the east continent actually defeated the ancient soldiers of the Pang clan? Chapter 3568. In the eastern region of Central Continent, in the sky above Dongtian City, the sword slave made his move. He performed the heaven punishment sword technique and broke through the battle formation formed by 1,000 ancient soldiers of the Pang clan. He then killed all 1,000 ancient soldiers. No one expected the sword slave to be so strong, and his swordsmanship cultivation had reached an unimaginable level. The ancient soldiers of the Pang clan could not fight back at all in the face of the sword slave. All the cultivators who saw this scene were shocked to the extreme. The ancient soldiers were the trump card of the Pang clan, but it seemed that this trump card of the Pang clan was finished. Just as the entire Pang clan was stunned by the outcome of this battle, Nanbatian of South Continent made a move. The South Continent Divine Army launched an attack on the Pang clan, attacking the cities controlled by the Pang clan. And the forces of the West State soon re-entered the Central State. A divine war broke out again. This time, the army of West Continent came in a fierce manner, covering the sky and earth. There were figures everywhere, and these were the attacks of the god-level soldiers. Soon, the army of West Continent took down 10 cities in a row, controlling an area with a radius of tens of thousands of miles, and once again taking root in Central Continent. The army of South Continent directly attacked a large city controlled by the Pang clan. This was a large city with a population of millions, and it was called Nantian City. On the other hand, Nantian City's defense was impregnable. One look was enough to tell that it would not be an easy task to break into such a city. Nanbatian led the 100,000 divine army of South Continent and surrounded the entire Nantian City. At this time, the experts of the Pang clan in Nantian City had already activated the city defense formation. This Nantian City was different from other cities. This city had a population of millions, and this was the foundation of Nantian City. Without a large number of mortals, how could it support the entire world of cultivation? If this city was lost, then Nanbatian of South Continent could directly lead his army to the ancestral land of the Pang clan. Flags fluttered outside Nantian City, and the sky was filled with the silhouettes of god-level soldiers. These soldiers were either gathered together in thousands or in tens of thousands, forming a battle formation. The entire Nantian City was filled with murderous intent. Nanbatian, that bastard! Pangoutian, the city lord of Southern Sky City, ascended to the top of the city tower. His expression changed when he saw the countless South Continent soldiers in the sky. Although he wasn't afraid of Nanbatian, his opponent's strength couldn't be underestimated. Pangoutian was an old man. To be exact, he was an aged fatty. His hair was white and he wasn't short. When he walked, the ground would tremble. At this time, the divine army inside Nantian City also started to move. Groups of soldiers rushed into the sky and formed battle formations, confronting the battle formations outside through the city defense formation. Fatty Pang, obediently come out and surrender. If you do, I might spare your life. Nanbatian's voice resounded throughout the entire region. Countless cultivators heard his voice. Nanbatian, don't be so arrogant. Come and attack me if you have the ability. Unfortunately, you won't have the chance to do so. Peng Outyen shouted in disdain from the city gate tower. Is that so? Then I'll show you how powerful I am. Without hesitation, Nan Batian commanded the army to attack the Nantian city in front of him. In an instant, the South Continent army outside the Nantian city moved. Rumble! Powerful waves of divine power spread out, and the entire void looked as if it was about to explode. Rays of destructive divine light rushed out from the battle formations and bombarded the Nantian city defense formation. The entire Guardian formation immediately shook, and countless runes appeared in the void, intertwining to form a mysterious formation diagram. The Nantian city defense formation was incredible. It directly blocked the first wave of attack from the South Continent army. However, at this time, the cultivators in Nantian city were extremely terrified. They were afraid that Nantian city would be breached. If Nantian city was breached, the mortals would be fine. Nan Batian would not do something as stupid as massacring the entire city. However, the cultivators were different. In addition to the cultivators of the Pang clan, there were also countless rogue cultivators and cultivators of other clans gathered in Nantian city. Once the city was breached, the rogue cultivators and cultivators of other clans would become Nan Batian's hunting targets. While Nan Batian was attacking Nantian city, the West Continent army had also advanced to a place 100 miles away from West Heaven City. They could attack West Heaven City at any time. At this time, in the ancestral land of the Pang clan, the old ancestor of the Pang clan was furious. In the ancestral hall, the high-level members of the Pang clan looked extremely serious. Old ancestor, what should we do? Nan Batian is attacking Nantian city. Once the city is breached, the consequences will be unimaginable. A middle-aged man suddenly stepped forward and said to the old ancestor of the Pang clan sitting on the throne, "Who is willing to fight Nan Batian?" The old ancestor of the Pang clan glanced at the experts of the Pang clan in the ancestral hall. None of the experts of the Pang clan in the ancestral hall spoke, and no one stood up to ask to fight. One had to know that Nan Batian was a fierce person. It was extremely dangerous to fight against him, and one could lose their life at any time. "Humph! You're all a bunch of trash," the old ancestor of the Pang clan said. The high-level members of the Pang clan in the ancestral hall could not help but lower their heads, not daring to look at the old ancestor on the throne. "Pang Xian you go." The old ancestor of the Pang clan looked at the white-haired young man standing in a corner of the hall and said, "Him?" When everyone heard that, they immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, the old ancestor did not call for them. Otherwise, they would definitely die on this trip. The old ancestor of the Pang clan could not help but frown. Everyone's expressions fell into his eyes. When had the Pang clan ever been so aggrieved? Someone actually killed their way to the Pang clan. This was simply a disgrace to the Pang clan. The white-haired young man did not say anything. He then turned around and walked out of the ancestral hall. Pang Xian was a genius of the Pang clan. He became famous in the late ancient times and had once fought with quasi-supremes. More than one quasi-supremes had died in his hands. He was a legend of the Pang clan. With Pang Xian taking action, it was naturally in the bag. However, Pang Xian's opponent was Nan Batian, whose cultivation and combat strength were not comparable to ordinary quasi-supremes. Pang Xian left the ancestral land of the Pang clan and rushed to Nantian city. At this time, the news of Nan Batian attacking Nantian city had already spread. Countless cultivators rushed to Nantian city. This battle was still very attractive. As one of the most powerful existences in South Continent, Nan Batian's cultivation was definitely powerful enough to make quasi-supremes tremble. Rumble! The world shook. The army of South Continent displayed extremely powerful combat strength. The battle formation formed by the army of South Continent was operating crazily. Rays of divine light rushed out from the battle formation and bombarded the Nantian city's protective formation. Nantian city's protective formation was undergoing the most severe test. On the city tower, Pang Outyen still had no intention of taking action. It was definitely not an easy task for the guy outside to attack and kill his way in. "Nan Batian, the South Continent's army is only SOSO. Haha. Pang Outian laughed. Hee, I'll make it so that you won't even be able to cry later. Nan Batian stared ahead and said coldly. Then, he took out a battle spear. It was a black battle spear, but the aura it exuded was terrifying. Swoosh! Nan Batian immediately activated the black spear in his hand. In the next moment, the black spear immediately erupted with the aura of the divine path. The black spear turned into a ray of black light and directly collided with the protective formation. This time, the layer of divine light formed by the power of the protective formation was finally broken. What? Seeing this scene, Pang Outian, who was on the city tower, could not sit still anymore. He immediately attacked Nan Batian, who had just entered the formation. Clang! A heavenly halberd directly smashed against the spear in Nan Batian's hand. Nan Batian only felt a shock in his hand, followed by pain. However, he still held on to the spear in his hand tightly, which was why the spear in his hand was not shaken off. How is this possible? Nan Batian could not believe that Pang Outian was actually so powerful. He was covered in fat, but it did not affect his movement speed at all. Again! Pang Outian directly struck again, and a violent wave of power spread out. The heavenly halberd in his hand directly smashed against the long sword in Nan Batian's hand. This time, only half of the sword in Nan Batian's hand was left. Nan Batian had no choice but to retreat. His opponent was like a god of destruction, and the battle intent he displayed was also giving him a headache. Aren't you very powerful? Why are you afraid now? Pang Outian mocked. Kill! Nan Batian did not say anything else, and directly attacked. The two great experts fought in the sky above Nantian City. At this time, a large number of soldiers also took the opportunity to attack Nantian City. The soldiers of the South Continent formed a killing formation and directly attacked Nantian City. However, at this time, the soldiers of Nantian City also came out to meet them. When the soldiers from the two camps met, a great battle broke out instantly. The soldiers from both camps formed a battle formation and immediately collided with each other. Immediately, figures fell from the sky one after another. In just a single charge, more than a dozen cultivators from both sides had died in an instant, which shocked Wang Qun greatly. Countless figures were fighting, and screams were constantly heard. The soldiers of Nantian City seemed to be somewhat unable to defeat the soldiers of the South Continent, and actually showed signs of being defeated. I'll kill whoever retreats! Pang Outian's voice spread to the ears of every cultivator in the city. Countless cultivators of the Pang clan were instantly shocked. Those who wanted to retreat immediately rushed towards the soldiers of the East Continent, and dared not have the idea of retreating. Chapter 3569. There were 5 divine cities in the central continent of the ancestral god realm. These 5 divine cities stood in the 5 directions of the central continent, and guarded the 5 poles. For countless years, the 5 divine cities of the central continent had experienced countless divine wars and never fallen. They were East Sky City, South Sky City, West Sky City, North Sky City, and Middle Sky City. These 5 divine cities were regarded as the ancestral cities by the cultivation world of the central continent. They had an irreplaceable position in the hearts of the cultivators of the central continent. In the eyes of the cultivators of the central continent, whoever controlled these 5 ancestral cities could unify the entire central continent. At this time, 3 of the 5 ancestral cities of the central continent were under the control of the Big Clan: South Sky City, West Sky City, and Middle Sky City. North Sky City was under the control of the Kanglan clan. East Sky City was occupied by Tsung Kei's East Continent Army. At this time, the South Continent Army led by Nan Batian was attacking South Sky City. The spirit chi of heaven and earth in the area where South Sky City was located was extremely chaotic. Divine light constantly rushed out of South Sky City. Some shot up into the sky and disappeared into the depths of the sky. Some were blocked by the Nantian City's protective divine light and exploded in the void. At this time, Nan Batian had already killed his way into South Sky City and was fighting with the Big Clan's Nantian City Lord, Pang Outian. Rumble! two quasi-supreme forces constantly collided. Every time the two figures collided, the void would instantly explode, and a pitch-black hole would appear in the sky. No one dared to approach these two gods of death. If they were affected by these two gods of death, their bodies and souls would definitely be destroyed, and they wouldn't even be able to become ghosts. At this time, high up in the sky, the broken light screen was constantly being repaired. The soldiers of the big clan who rushed out of South Sky City had already blocked the gap in the light screen and were fighting with the soldiers of the South Continent. It was extremely tragic. Soldiers' corpses constantly fell from the sky, and the sky was raining blood. These were all god-level soldiers. Once such soldiers died, they would become immortal corpses. The blood raining from the sky was also divine blood. The soldiers of the South Continent outside desperately wanted to kill their way into South Sky City, while the soldiers of South Sky City desperately wanted to kill the soldiers who rushed in. And the soldiers of the South Continent who had already killed their way into South Sky City were surrounded by the soldiers of the big clan. Soldiers of the South Continent kept dying tragically. Boom! Clang! Extremely shocking sounds of collision and metal colliding rang out continuously. Nanbatian displayed his extremely strong combat strength, and was locked in a stalemate with Pang Outyen. Swoosh! Pang Outyen waved the halberd in his hand, and a 10-kilometer-long spatial crack immediately appeared in the void. Humph! Nanbatian let out a cold laugh and charged forward, completely ignoring the spatial crack in front of him. He charged through the spatial crack in front of him, and instantly appeared in front of Pang Outyen. Courting death! Pang Outyen roared in rage, and the ancient halberd in his hand smashed down on Nanbatian's head. Hey! Nanbatian stretched out his right hand and actually grabbed the blade of the halberd that was slashing down. What? Upon seeing this, Pang Outyen's heart skipped a beat. This fellow actually managed to catch his ancient halberd with his bare hands? How was this possible? Pang Outyen focused his gaze and saw that Nanbatian was wearing a black glove. Ancient divine runes continuously appeared and interweaved on the glove, emitting powerful waves of divine energy. In the next moment, Pang Outyen only felt a huge force passing from Nanbatian's hand to his ancient halberd. His hands that were holding on to the ancient halberd trembled, and the halberd almost flew out of his hands. Roar! Pang Outyen roared in rage, and an even more powerful divine energy erupted from his body. The ancient halberd in his hand immediately emitted a dazzling divine light. Rays of golden divine runes rushed out from the entire ancient halberd, and all the power of the ancient halberd was being drawn out. Buzz! The ancient halberd let out a buzzing sound, and a blade of light directly rushed out from the halberd's blade. It actually shook off Nanbatian's right hand. But at this moment, Nanbatian suddenly disappeared into the void, and in the next moment, countless Nanbatians appeared in the sky. This is... Pang Outyen couldn't help but be shocked when he saw this scene. He hurriedly used his heavenly eye to scan the figures of Nanbatian, trying to find the real Nanbatian. However, he was shocked to find that his heavenly eye had actually lost its effect. The countless figures of Nanbatian seemed to be the real Nanbatian. How was this possible? At this moment, countless Nanbatians directly rushed towards Pang Outyen, covering the sky and covering the earth. There were densely packed figures everywhere. Kill! Pang Outyen roared angrily, and waved the ancient halberd in his hand, killing the countless Nanbatians who were rushing towards him. With a swing of the great halberd, dozens of Nanbatians immediately exploded in the void. Bang, 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 bang! As Pang Outyen attacked crazily, one figure after another exploded in the void, turning into clouds of blood mist. It was as if real bodies of flesh and blood had exploded. Everyone was stunned by this scene, especially the experts of the Pang clan in Nantian City. They were inexplicably shocked. This Nanbatian actually had the ability to change and transform. This kind of method was too shocking. Bang! At this moment, a palm wearing a black glove suddenly slammed into Pang Outyen's back. In the next moment, the sound of bones breaking immediately came from within his body. With just this one attack, Pang Outyen knew that his entire spine had been broken into dozens of pieces. His entire body flew forward, and his divine body was almost blasted into two. Peng Aotian spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Peng Aotian was in disbelief, and he thought to himself, "How is this possible? How did this Nan Batian suddenly become so powerful? Could it be that this guy has been pretending to be weak all this time? Preposterous!" Peng Aotian was both shocked and enraged, and a violent power of the divine Tao erupted from his flesh, blood, and bones. His wounds were quickly healing, and his broken bones were also being reconnected as necrotic flesh and blood fell from his body. In just a few breaths' time, his divine body was completely healed. Not only did his battle prowess not decline, but it even soared, and the entire heaven and earth shook. However, in the next moment, tragedy befell him. He was directly drowned by countless Nan Batians. Die! Soon, Peng Aotian fought his way out of the sea of people, in an extremely disheveled state. His hair was disheveled, his body was covered in blood, and his armor was in tatters. He had actually escaped. However, in the next moment, he was drowned by countless Nan Batians who charged at him. This time, he was unable to fight his way out of the sea of people. "Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me." Peng Aotian's voice came from the sea of people. Then, there was a huge explosion. A ball of divine light that was 10 times more dazzling than the divine sun in the sky appeared in the sky above South Heaven City. An extremely terrifying wave of divine power erupted, and countless Nan Batians were directly blasted into a mist of blood by this explosion of divine power. The extremely violent divine power spread out, and the entire South Heaven City shook. The void was silently destroyed, and even the defensive formation of South Heaven City was shaken, and cracks appeared on it. Countless Nan Batians were obliterated in the void by the vast and violent divine power, and a scene of destruction appeared in the sky above South Heaven City. All the cultivators in South Heaven City were extremely terrified. The vast and mighty aura of destruction that descended from the sky made their souls tremble. What happened? Did the city lord actually die in battle? Countless cultivators in the city felt as if a great catastrophe was about to befall them when they saw the scene in the sky. It should be noted that once Peng Aotian was defeated, the other cultivators in the city would also be punished and killed by Nan Batian. It should be noted that the other cultivators in South Heaven City who could walk around in South Heaven City were naturally fellows who relied on the Peng clan. Such fellows would naturally be punished by Nan Batian. However, the mortals in South Heaven City would be fine. At this time, the doors of all the houses in South Heaven City were tightly shut. All the mortals closed their doors and windows and hid in their houses, waiting for the end of this divine battle. The mortals in the ancestral god realm knew of the existence of the gods. If a mortal became a god, it would definitely be a matter that brought glory to the ancestors. When a person became a god, even his fowls and dogs would ascend to the heavens. This was not a legend in the ancestral god realm, but something that really happened. In South Heaven City, this ancient city, most of the mortals in the city were directly or indirectly related to the gods. Otherwise, how could ordinary mortals live in South Heaven City, this ancient city of gods? This was the real battle between gods, and mortals suffered. After this battle, regardless of the outcome, the mortals in South Heaven City would more or less be affected. Rumble. In the sky above South Heaven City, the void was annihilated, and countless figures disappeared. Not only Nan Batian, but the other warriors were also affected. The dazzling ball of divine light spread out, and all the figures that were illuminated by the divine light had only one ending, which was the destruction of both body and soul. The destructive divine light even corroded the great city defense formation of South Heaven City. This was an indiscriminate attack that did not distinguish between friend and foe. Peng Aotian was a ruthless person of his generation. In order to perish together with Nan Batian, he did not even care about his own people. The suddenly expanding ball of divine light suddenly shrank, and an incomparably huge black hole appeared in the sky above South Heaven City. A wave of heaven-devouring power surged out of the black hole, swallowing all the surrounding warriors. At this time, South Heaven City under the black hole also began to shake, as if it was about to be swallowed by the black hole in the sky. Just as the entire South Heaven City was about to leave the ground, incomparably ancient divine patterns appeared in South Heaven City. These divine patterns forcibly suppressed the shaking South Heaven City. Chapter 3570. Pangaotian, the city lord of Nantian City, was forced to self-destruct by Nanbatian. This shocked the experts of the Pang clan to the extreme. Pangaotian self-destructed his god source, burned his soul, flesh, blood, and bones, and all the divine power contained in them turned into destructive divine flames, burning everything in the world. Anything enveloped by the destructive divine flames, no matter what it was, would be burned into nothingness. Not even a speck of dust would be left behind. The countless clones that Nanbatian had conjured were burned into nothingness by the divine flames of destruction. Even the void of heaven and earth was incinerated into nothingness. Countless cultivators in the city were terrified to the extreme when they saw this. Even their souls were trembling. This destructive divine flame was too terrifying, enough to destroy the world. Even the ancient divine patterns inside Nantian City were activated, triggering the ancient power of the divine path to protect the entire city. This was the reason why Nantian City could exist for so long. There were ancient divine patterns left by supreme beings inside the city. Even an extreme supreme being might not be able to destroy Nantian City. The destructive divine flames that descended from the sky were blocked by an ancient god power that rushed out from inside Nantian City. Countless living beings in Nantian City finally breathed a sigh of relief, but the Behemoth tribe soldiers and the South Continent soldiers outside suffered a disaster. The divine flame of destruction spread out, and all the soldiers were destroyed before they could even let out a scream. When the destructive divine flames rose to the limit, the entire sky was shrouded in divine flames. Almost all the soldiers in Nantian City were killed. The soldiers of the South Continent who attacked Nantian City were also almost all killed. However, this was only the beginning of the nightmare. The moment the power of the destructive divine flames exploded to the limit, the destructive divine flames suddenly shrank, and a huge black hole suddenly appeared in the sky. Rumble! A heaven-devouring power surged out of the black hole. Before the Nantian City and South Continent warriors, who thought they had escaped the calamity, could react, they were swallowed by the black hole that suddenly appeared. They still could not escape the fate of being killed in body and soul. The devouring power that descended from the sky almost swallowed Nantian City. However, the ancient god power that erupted from Nantian City showed its power again and suppressed the entire Nantian City. In the end, even the great city defense formation of Nantian City collapsed. All the soldiers of the South Continent outside retreated 100,000 miles away, preserving their strength. However, the big clan of Nantian City had suffered heavy losses. 90% of the big clan's warriors had been killed in body and soul. This was a loss that the big clan would not be able to recover in a short period of time. One had to know that a god-ranked warrior could not be nurtured in a short period of time. City Lord, countless cultivators in Nantian City were incomparably sad. Pangaotian had died in a tragic battle, but he had died a worthy death because he had risked his life to kill Nanbatian. Now that Nanbatian was dead, the Pang clan no longer feared the forces of the South Continent. The black hole in the sky above Nantian City was still expanding, and the devouring power that came out of the black hole was also growing stronger. In the end, it seemed like it was going to devour the entire world. At this time, the cultivators of the big clan had gathered in Nantian City. There were also thousands of big clan warriors and countless rogue cultivators in the city. These cultivators were inextricably linked to the big clan. Nantian City had reached the point where the city was about to fall. The cultivators in the city knew that they could not escape at this time because they had no way out. They could only fight to the death against the invading enemies. Several hours later, the black hole in the sky began to gradually shrink, and the broken world began to be slowly repaired by the power of the world. It had to be said that the power produced by Pangaotian's self-destruction was too shocking. It could almost destroy everything. The scene of destruction was extremely shocking, causing the souls of all cultivators to tremble. Good heavens! In the distant sky, a figure stood on the clouds. He could not help but be moved when he witnessed this scene. This person was Gu Fei's clone. A super-god battle broke out in Nantian City, which naturally alarmed countless experts. Gu Fei's clone was one of them, and he immediately rushed to the vicinity of Nantian City. Rumble! The black hole in the sky above Nantian City was still emitting shocking sounds of wind and thunder. The cultivators who were swallowed by the black hole were definitely dead in body and soul. Pang Outyan was ruthless enough to trick Nan Batian. However, Gu Fei's clone knew that Pang Outyan had probably died in vain because Nan Batian was not someone who could be killed so easily. Nan Batian was the #1 expert in the South Continent. How could Pang Outyan kill him? If the old ancestor of the big clan had taken action, there might have been a chance of success. Unfortunately, the person who took action was Pang Outyan, so it was hard to say. Gu Fei's clone did not leave. He was still watching. Half a day later, the black hole in the sky above Nantian City disappeared. The world finally returned to peace, and Nantian City still stood tall on the ground. 100,000 miles away, flags fluttered. The God Clan army of the South Continent was still in a battle formation and did not retreat. The soaring murderous aura terrified all living beings in the surrounding 10,000 miles. Some of the more powerful living beings had already fled, leaving only the weaker ones. At this time, in the center of the battle formation formed by countless soldiers, there was an altar floating in the air. On the altar there was a stone coffin. The stone coffin was emitting strong waves of divine power. Those fellows think they can kill the Overlord like this? What a joke! An old general in battle armor rode on a ferocious fire-scaled beast. The old general held a divine orb in his hand, and a figure was sitting cross-legged inside the divine orb. The figure inside the fist-sized divine orb looked exactly like Nan Batian. To be precise, the figure inside the divine orb was Nan Batian. Nan Batian had already prepared a backup plan. The old general jumped down from the back of the fire-scaled beast, and with the divine orb in his hand, he stepped onto the altar and arrived in front of the stone coffin. At this time, the waves of divine power inside the stone coffin became stronger and stronger. Ancient divine runes appeared on the stone coffin, and the entire stone coffin was sealed. But at this time, the divine power inside the stone coffin seemed to be about to break out. The Overlord is invincible. The old divine general performed a secret skill, and the lid of the stone coffin moved. A gap was opened, and the divine orb in the old divine general's hand flew into the stone coffin. Bang! The lid of the stone coffin closed again, leaving no gap. The next moment, the waves of divine power coming from the stone coffin weakened. Soon, the stone coffin calmed down completely, and not a trace of divine power was emitted from it. At this time, the old divine general stood guard beside the stone coffin. Although there were countless soldiers guarding it, the surroundings were extremely quiet. Even the countless battle beasts did not roar, and everything was very quiet. The experts watching from afar did not know what the God Clan soldiers of the South Continent were doing, but at this time, the big clan forces in South Sky City began to move. Thousands of soldiers in the city rushed out from the inner city, and even the soldiers of the big clan guarding the city lord mansion were mobilized. Hum! A huge teleportation formation in South Sky City lit up. Countless runes rushed out of the formation, and a huge door of light appeared in the sky above the teleportation formation. Then, neat troops of soldiers riding on battle beasts walked out of the door of light. Every soldier wore armor, held a spear in their hands, and wore a helmet on their heads. They looked extremely fierce. Every soldier was shrouded in a strong murderous aura. When the murderous aura of countless God Clan soldiers gathered together, it was absolutely terrifying. Reinforcements have finally arrived. The cultivators in South Sky City were all surprised and happy, but also felt that it was a pity. If the reinforcements had come half a day earlier, the city lord of South Sky City, Pang Outyan, would not have died in battle. Pang Outyan's death was a great loss to the entire big clan. After all, Pang Outian was the younger brother of the current clan leader of the Big Clan. When the news of his death reached the ancestral land of the Big Clan, the entire Big Clan's upper echelons were shocked. The clan leader, in particular, was even more furious. He directly sent the most elite God Clan soldiers, apart from the ancient soldiers, to South Sky City. More than 10,000 God Clan soldiers walked out of the door of light above the teleportation formation in South Sky City. The person who commanded these God Clan soldiers was a patriarch of the Big Clan. This patriarch's cultivation was even higher than that of Pang Outian, who had died in battle. With the arrival of these 10,000 God Clan soldiers, the South Continent's God Clan army could definitely be easily defeated. This was because the commander of the South Continent's God Clan army, Nan Batian, had died in battle. Pang Tong was definitely one of the most powerful patriarchs in the Big Clan. Although he was a patriarch, he had the appearance of a child. At this time, Pang Tong was standing on the head of an old dragon, looking down at South Sky City proudly. The ancient god city is just SOSO. Pang Tong had never been to South Sky City, but in his opinion, the ancient god city in front of him did not have an undeserved reputation, but it was an exaggeration. Among the many cities controlled by the Pang clan, there were many cities that were larger and had more spirit energy than Nantian City. Let's go and meet those guys from the South Continent. Pang Tong had no intention of descending from the sky. He led the 10,000 God Clan soldiers directly to the South Continent's God Clan army 100,000 miles away. The cultivators in South Sky City were inexplicably shocked when they saw this scene. Why didn't the reinforcements enter the city? While Pang Tong led the Pang Clan army to attack the South Continent's God Clan army, San Kei's army finally crossed the continent to the east of the ancestral God Realm's central continent. The appearance of 1,000,000 God Clan soldiers in the East Continent was definitely a big deal. The news spread quickly and shook the entire central continent's cultivation world. What is San Kei trying to do? Is he trying to dominate the entire ancestral God realm? Chapter 3571. San Kei had mobilized a 1,000,000-strong Protoss army to attack the Pang clan, shocking the entire cultivation world of Zhongzhou State. It wasn't hard to imagine that San Kei had mobilized the entire East Continent's forces. The Dusk Snake, the Celestial God, and the Earth Spirit race were the elites of the three East Continent's strongest clans. There were also other cultivation forces in the East Continent. The entire cultivation world of the East Continent was mobilized by Tsang Quebec. It could be said that San Kei was determined to fight to the death with the Pang clan. San Kei was not like Nan Batian. San Kei had no scruples and went all out because Gu Fei was still in the East Continent. Who would dare to offend Gu Fei? He wasn't afraid that the Golden Crow ancestor would attack the Chaos Golden Rock race's ancestral land. Gu Fei was in seclusion in the Chaos Golden Rock race's ancestral land. The Golden Crow ancestor wouldn't be stupid enough to launch a sneak attack at this time. If Gu Fei attacked, the Golden Crow ancestor would be in for a tragedy. The Golden Crow clan had recently been defeated by the chaotic Golden Rock clan, so it was difficult for them to organize an attack that could threaten the chaotic Golden Rock clan's ancestral land. At this time, in the southern region of Zhongzhou State, after Pang Tong led the 10,000-strong Protoss army out of the transmission formation, they directly pounced on the Protoss army in the south region 100,000 miles away. Rumble! The Pang clan's 10,000-strong celestial race army charged through the sky, causing the entire world to tremble. Countless war beasts crushed the void, and everywhere they passed, countless living beings were terrified. What is this Pang Tong trying to do? An old man with white hair and white eyebrows walked out of the city lord's mansion in Nantian City. He held a black walking stick in his hand. The old man was furious. According to the plan, Pang Tong's army should enter Nantian City and meet up with the forces in the city before launching an attack on the South Continent's Protoss army. But Pang Tong, that bastard, changed the plan without authorization, and directly led his army to kill the Southern Continent's army. Pang Tong, come back here! The old man transmitted to Pang Tong. Humph! Pang Tong only sneered and ignored the old man in front of the gate of the city lord's mansion of Nantian City. Pang Tong, are you going to disobey the clan leader's orders? The old man said angrily. He slammed the black staff on the ground with all his might. Bang! The hard stone slabs on the ground immediately cracked into many cracks. When this old man was enraged, he naturally had an imposing aura. Pang Tong continued to ignore the old man. At this time, the South Continent's Protoss army had already discovered the Protoss army under Pang Tong's command. A 10,000-man battle formation in the South Continent's Protoss army immediately set up for battle. As the old immortal general waved his battle flag on the sacrificial altar, the 10,000 immortal battle formation of South Continent immediately moved towards Pang Tong's army. Within the 10,000-men battle formation, countless formation runes were surging and interweaving. The aura of every single soldier was linked together. The combined power of 10,000 soldiers was definitely enough to fight against the quasi-supreme being. Soon, the two battle formations met. Pang Tong raised his right hand, and the celestial race army behind him immediately stopped. Even the battle beasts under the warriors quietened down. At this time, the battle formation formed by the South Continent's Protoss army also stopped. The leader of the South Continent's Protoss army was a middle-aged general wearing battle armor and a helmet. Haha! They actually came to die. These guys from the Pang clan are really stupid. The middle-aged general laughed loudly. The battle beast under him growled in a low voice, and hot air rushed out of its mouth and nose. It was a fire lion, and a powerful killing intent erupted from its body. Who are you calling stupid? Pang Tong, who was standing on the head of the old dragon, glared at the middle-aged general and shouted. Is there no one else in the Pang clan? They actually sent a child to die. The middle-aged general pointed at Pang Tong, who was on the old dragon's head, and laughed. You're courting death! Pang Tong was furious. Someone actually dared to look down on him like this. He really deserved to die. In the next moment, the old dragon under Pang Tong's feet roared and swept its tail towards the middle-aged general. Roar! The fire lion under the middle-aged general also roared and directly spat out a mouthful of divine fire at the dragon's tail. Boom! A ball of divine fire exploded, instantly engulfing the dragon's tail. The divine fire burned the old dragon's tail until it cracked continuously, and a burnt smell filled the air. The old dragon hurriedly retracted its tail. Haha, braised dragon is not bad. Boys, we can add another dish today. The middle-aged general laughed wantonly. Haha. The soldiers behind the middle-aged general also laughed loudly. Kill! Kill them all! Pang Tong flew into a rage out of humiliation. He waved his hand and actually commanded the army behind him to charge forward. An extremely terrifying murderous aura immediately erupted from the Pang clan's battle formation, and the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. Kill! The power of the Pang clan's 10,000-man battle formation erupted, causing the void to explode. Streaks of extremely sharp divine light shot out from the formation, piercing towards the middle-aged general and the battle soldiers behind him. Hum! At this moment, a rumbling sound came from the void. The middle-aged general's battle formation was also activated, and a layer of divine light surged from the formation, instantly enveloping the entire battle formation. Countless piercing rays of divine light were directly blocked by the divine light shield formed by the battle formation of the South Continent's soldiers. The divine light shield vibrated, and divine patterns appeared on it. Countless divine patterns interweaved to form an ancient formation diagram. Kill! The middle-aged general waved his right hand, and the battle formation of the South Continent's divine clan army was also activated. 10,000 God Realm soldiers directly charged forward. Boom! The void exploded, and the two battle formations instantly collided. The soldiers from both sides began to fight, and soon, the corpses of gods fell from the sky. At this time, Pang Tong and the middle-aged general were also fighting. The old dragon and the fire lion were also fighting, and their roars shook the heavens and the earth. Although the old dragon and the fire lion were the mounts of Pang Tong and the middle-aged general, their cultivation was also incomparably strong, and it was hard to tell who would win. At this time, in the distant sky, Gu Fei's doppelganger watched this scene coldly. Those fellows from the Pang clan were really stupid. How was it possible to destroy the South Continent's army with just 10,000 soldiers? When the South Continent's divine clan army fought against Pang Outyan, they held back their strength. Pang Tong thought that if Pang Outyan killed Nanbatian, the South Continent's divine clan army would not be able to withstand a single blow. Gu Fei's doppelganger was watching the show. The 10,000 God clan soldiers of the Pang clan were definitely wolves walking into the tiger's mouth, and they would not be able to return. One should know that if the South Continent's divine clan army did not have some ability to kill their way into the central continent, wouldn't they have long been destroyed by the Pang clan? Battle cries shook the heavens and the earth, the battle beasts roared, and the two sides fought fiercely. The entire sky was filled with figures, and corpses of gods fell from the sky continuously. Blood had already dyed the mountains below. The two battle formations were in operation, and the lives of the soldiers from both sides were constantly being obliterated. It was like two mountains colliding, and it was extremely terrifying. Preposterous! Only now did Pang Tong realize that the South Continent's divine clan army was indeed a tough nut to crack. He had been too confident, and it was too late to regret it now. He could only brace himself and fight. Pang Tong unleashed his mystiques, and continuously clashed with the middle-aged general. The two forces of the divine Tao kept colliding, and there was a loud explosion that was even more shocking than thunder. "Little guy, have you weaned off milk?" "Ha ha." The middle-aged general laughed as he attacked. The battle spear in his hand pierced through the void, piercing towards the center of Pang Tong's brows. Although he said this, he did not dare to let his guard down. One had to know that this childlike fellow was definitely an ancient antique. Although Pang Tong looked like a child, that was only his appearance. His eyes were not something a child should have. Go to hell. Pang Tong was truly enraged, and his eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. He waved his hands, and dragon shadows appeared in the void, lunging towards the middle-aged general. "Want to kill me? Do you have the ability to do so?" the middle-aged general said disdainfully. He brandished the battle spear in his hand, dispersing all of the dragon shadows that were lunging at him. He was extremely domineering. Swoosh! The battle spear in the middle-aged general's hand emitted an immortal divine light that instantly pierced through the center of Pang Tong's brows. It was extremely fast. In the next moment, Pang Tong's figure instantly disappeared into the void. The penetrating divine light had only pierced an afterimage that had yet to dissipate. Dragon soars to the 9 heavens, kill the ancestor god. Pang Tong's voice resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a terrifying dragon shadow descended from the sky, directly blasting the middle-aged general's body. The middle-aged general was actually blasted into a mist of blood. What? When the South Continent's Protoss soldiers saw this scene, they were extremely shocked. However, in the next moment, the mist of blood instantly converged, and the middle-aged general's figure appeared in the void. An existence of his level would not be killed so easily. At this moment, Pang Tong's figure also appeared in the void. Kill the ancestor god? Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? The middle-aged general stared at Pang Tong and said coldly. Kill. Pang Tong did not hesitate and directly attacked again. The middle-aged general was once again blasted away. This time, his divine body actually shattered. The combat strength that Pang Tong displayed was too strong. It was as if he had eaten some divine medicine that could raise his cultivation. This caused everyone to be inexplicably shocked. What's going on? Gu Fei's clone, who was watching the battle from afar, was also in disbelief. Could it be that Pang Tong had also cultivated a secret technique similar to the Heaven Ascension secret technique? Pang Tong forcefully charged into the formation formed by the South Continent's celestial soldiers. Instantly, the formation erupted into clouds of blood, and over a dozen South Continent celestial soldiers were instantly killed by him. Damn it! The middle-aged general once again reassembled his divine body. However, His divine body had been blasted apart twice in a row. Even after reassembling his divine body, his vitality was still injured. Kill. Chapter 3572. The Pang clan's celestial army and the South Continent's celestial army engaged in a fierce battle. Battle matrices against battle matrices, and an extremely brutal battle ensued in the skies. The skies were filled with human figures, and divine corpses constantly fell from the skies. Blood rained down from the heavens, the rain of divine blood. The ground that was stained with divine blood turned crimson. Even after countless years of wind and rain, the land still couldn't wash away this bloody color. Roar! Pang Tong let out a furious roar and charged madly at the South Continent's middle-aged general. He seemed to have transformed into an ancestral dragon of the 9 heavens, and he unleashed his most powerful battle prowess as he continuously blasted apart the general's divine body. Damn it! The general was both shocked and enraged. Pang Tong looked like a child, but his cultivation and battle prowess were definitely above that of ordinary elder gods. This fellow was definitely an ancestor-level existence of the Pang clan. The general didn't dare to tarry. He had no choice but to go all out. The spear in his hand seemed to come to life as it transformed into a beam of eternal light that pierced towards Pang Tong. Kill! Pang Tong transformed into an ancestral dragon, and his draconic claws slammed towards the beam of eternal light. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out as the dragon claws collided with the beam of divine light. The beam of eternal light radiated with dazzling divine light, piercing through the dragon claws and shooting towards Pang Tong's dragon head. What? Pang Tong was shocked. He lowered his head, and the beam of divine light sliced off one of his ancestral dragon horns. In the next moment, the middle-aged general actually rode on Pang Tong's ancestral dragon form, and began to smash his fists down. Everyone was stunned by this scene. This fellow was simply too ferocious. After all, Pang Tong's ancestral dragon true body was a secret technique of the Pang clan. This was a technique, but it didn't mean that the Pang clan and the Dragon clan were related by blood. The Dragon clan's physical bodies were publicly acknowledged as the strongest in the world of cultivation. One of the Pang clan's primogenitors had created this technique. Transforming into an ancestral dragon to slay elder gods was definitely not an empty statement. But at this moment, the ancestral dragon that could kill ancestor gods was being ridden by a war ancestor. The war ancestor was swinging his fists at the dragon's head. Pang Tong was dumbfounded by the middle-aged general's attack. At this time, the battle ancestor extended his hand and the immortal light flew into his hand. He then stabbed the dragon's head. Kacha! The divine light formed by the spear pierced through the dragon's scales and pierced the dragon's head. Blood splattered everywhere. This scene was extremely realistic. It was as if a dragon slayer was slaying a dragon. Roar! The ancestor dragon that Pang Tong had transformed into felt the pain and suddenly exerted force, sending the middle-aged war ancestor who was riding on him flying. The huge dragon claw directly smashed into the middle-aged war ancestor's body. The middle-aged battle ancestor was sent flying thousands of miles away. Boom! The next moment, the entire mountain broke off from the mountainside, and the upper half collapsed from the sky. Rumble! Smoke and dust soared into the heavens. The great earth was shaking, and the creatures who couldn't escape in time were directly buried alive by the collapsing mountains. At this time, Pang Tong pulled out the spear that was stuck in his head and broke it in two. The divine light that erupted from the spear gradually dissipated, and it turned into 2 pieces of stubborn iron. The ancestor dragon that Pang Tong had transformed into charged directly at the place where the war ancestor had fallen. He spat out a mouthful of divine flames at the collapsed mountain. Boom! Endless divine flames erupted and instantly enveloped the entire area, burning the void until it was annihilated. The divine flames that Pang Tong had transformed into as the ancestor dragon were filled with flame-shaped patterns of the way. This was the divine fire of the Great Path. As long as one came into contact with a trace of the divine fire of the way, even a quasi-supreme would be burned to death. In the next moment, the divine fire of the great path burned a huge pit where the entire mountain had been. It was a bottomless pit. What? The cultivators who were watching the battle from afar were shocked when they saw this. At this time, they couldn't sense the aura of the South Continent's war ancestor. He was burned to death. It can't be. Even Gu Fei's doppelganger was a little surprised. It was known that the South Continent's war ancestor was no weakling. His cultivation was extremely powerful. Even if he couldn't compare to Pang Tong, he couldn't have been so easily killed by Pang Tong. Just when everyone was in shock, a figure suddenly appeared behind the ancestor dragon that Pang Tong had transformed into. That person waved his hand, and a flash of blade light flashed. In the next moment, the ancestor dragon that Pang Tong had transformed into flew up. What? The sudden change shocked everyone. The South Continent's war ancestor was so powerful that he could destroy Pang Tong's ancestor dragon real body with one strike and kill Pang Tong? It's him? At this time, above the clouds in the distance, a middle-aged man with a blade on his back stared at the South Continent's war ancestor who had killed Pang Tong. A light flashed in the depths of his eyes. You know him? An old man beside the middle-aged man said with some surprise. This old man was Ping Jingtian, an expert of the chaotic Golden Rock clan. And the middle-aged man with the blade on his back was Saber Master Nye Jingyan. This time, Sun Ke had decided to fight for hegemony in the ancestral god realm, and had invited many experts from the East Continent. Saber Master Nye Jingyan was one of the top 3 experts in the East Continent. Naturally, Sun Ke had invited this killing god. The East Pole ancestor, who was as famous as Saber Master Nye Jingyan, was a good person. Sun Ke had wanted to invite him, but he had refused. That guy is also a blade user. In the South Continent, there is only one person who can cultivate the blade principle to this level. Nye Jingyan stared at the figure and said with a serious expression. What? Is this guy the #1 blade user of the South Continent, Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin? Peng Jingtian said in surprise. The South Emperor and the East Ancestor were the 2 publicly acknowledged supreme experts of the Saber Dao in the ancestral god realm. These 2 experts were equally famous in the ancestral god realm, but one of them was in the South Continent, while the other was in the East Continent. They had never met, much less fought. No one knew who was stronger, the Saber Emperor of the South Continent, or the Saber Master of the East Continent. However, at this moment, the 2 experts of the blade principle met for the first time in the south region of the Central Continent, after countless years. The 2 of them could sense each other. In the distance, Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin suddenly turned around and looked at Nye Jingyan. The gazes of the 2 experts of the blade principle collided in an instant. At this moment, time and space between the 2 seemed to freeze. Everything in their eyes disappeared, leaving only the figures of each other. At this moment, the headless dragon corpse fell from the sky and smashed a mountain below. The dragon corpse then shrunk and turned into Pang Tong. Pang Tong was dead. He was killed by Yi Jingshin, who was at the battle ancestor realm. Even his primordial spirit was destroyed. He was an expert of a generation, but in the end, he died. At this moment, in the distant sky, the old dragon who was fighting with the fire lion forced the fire lion to retreat. Then, he rushed to the ground and bit Pang Tong's head. Then, he burrowed into the ground and tried to escape. Humph! A sneer was heard. Then, Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin withdrew his gaze from Nye Jingyan and casually slashed with his blade. Swoosh! A blade light flashed and a bottomless abyss immediately appeared on the ground. A dragon's roar was heard from the depths of the earth. Then, the depths of the earth became quiet. Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin jumped into the abyss that he had created with his blade. Soon, he rushed out of the abyss again, holding the head of a dragon in his hand. Pang Tong's mount could not escape from Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin's blade. It was also slashed by Yi Jingshin's blade. It was useless even if it burrowed into the depths of the earth. What's wrong with this guy? Why is he a warrior under Nanbatian? Nye Jingyan said in disbelief. One must know that the Saber Emperor of the South Continent was in existence on the same level as Nanbatian. It was impossible for Nan Batian to suppress such a person. Why don't you go and ask him why? Peng Jingtian glanced at Nye Jingyun and said, If I go, between the two of us, perhaps only one will survive. Nye Jingyun said very seriously. Both of them were supreme experts of the saber principle. Once such existences met, they would naturally erupt with the most powerful hostility and fighting intent. A battle was inevitable. As the saying went, 2 tigers cannot live on the same mountain. Both Nye Jingyun and Yi Jingshin had an urge to fight. They wanted to know who was stronger between the two. Not only them, but the other cultivators were also very curious about who was stronger between the 2 experts of the saber principle. Peng Jingtian did not say anything. He saw Yi Jingshin rush into the sky with the head of the dragon, and then throw the head of the old dragon into the battle formation of the Pang tribe. The Pang clan soldiers were thrown into a slight panic, but they quickly calmed down and began to retreat. The divine path power that erupted from the battle formation of the Pang tribe was extremely powerful. Countless Pang tribe soldiers fell from the sky and their divine bodies were pierced by the divine light from the battle formation of the Pang tribe. Want to escape? Since you're here, stay! Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin became one with his saber and rushed into the battle formation of the Pang tribe. The saber light exploded in the battle formation. Countless figures dissipated in the saber light. They were directly killed, their bodies and souls destroyed. With just one attack, thousands of Pang tribe soldiers were killed. This scared the living daylights out of the remaining Pang tribe soldiers. Run! The Pang tribe soldiers were defeated and fled in all directions. The remaining Pang tribe soldiers could not form a battle formation and could only escape. No one would have thought that the Saber Emperor was like a completely different person from the previous war. Venerate. His cultivation and combat strength had soared, and even his temperament had changed. Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin? Gu Fei's doppelganger's eyes lit up when he saw the shocking figure. This was a more terrifying existence than Nye Jingtian. This did not mean that Nye Jingtian was weaker than the Saber Emperor, but the Saber Emperor's murderous nature was stronger than Nye Jingtian's. Chapter 3573. No one would have thought that one of Nan Baishan's generals would have such a powerful background. He was actually the top expert in the South Continent. If Yi Jingshin's name was in ancient times, it could be said that everyone knew him. Even in the current era, the name Yi Jingshin could intimidate many experts of the older generation. However, since the Great War of Gods and Demons, Yi Jingshin had disappeared. No one knew where he had gone. Some people said that the Saber Emperor of the South Continent had died in battle. However, some people did not believe that the Saber Emperor had died in battle. After all, the Saber Emperor of the South Continent was an expert. How could he have died so easily? As it turned out, Saber Emperor Yi Jingshin had not died. He had become one of Nan Baishan's generals. This was unbelievable to the experts of the East Continent. Pang Tong's death was justified. Even if the clan leader of the Pang clan came in person, he might not be able to defeat Yi Jingshin. This guy killed with one strike. He killed Pang Tong, an old flood dragon, with one strike. There was no need for a second strike. Even when he broke the Pang clan's battle formation, he only used one strike. The Pang clan army led by Pang Tong was chased by the army of the Saber Emperor. Spears flew out of the army's battle formation and nailed the Pang clan soldiers to death in the void. As the spears were taken away by the soldiers of the South Continent, the corpses of the Pang clan soldiers that were nailed to death by the spears fell from the sky. This was definitely a 10,000-mile chase. When the temporarily formed army of Nantian City encountered Pang Tong's defeated army, almost all of Pang Tong's soldiers were killed. Only a dozen or so soldiers survived. What? When the old man from Nantian City saw this scene, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Pang Tong actually lost my clan's purest weapon. He deserves to die. Retreat! The old man from the Pang clan waved the black staff in his hand and ordered the army to retreat. At this time, the morale of the enemy was high, but the morale of the army was low. If they fought with the army of the South Continent at this time, there would only be one result: defeat and death. The great army of Nantian City stopped and retreated without panic. However, at this moment, the countless soldiers of the Nantian City army were extremely nervous. The dozen soldiers under Pang Tong's command were about to charge into the battle formation of the Nantian City army. These soldiers all thought that their lives were finally saved. Just as they were feeling surprised and overjoyed, a dozen or so beams of divine light suddenly descended from the sky, nailing these soldiers to death in the void. More than a dozen behemoth warriors died before they could even let out a scream. Nantian City's soldiers' expressions changed drastically when they saw their soldiers being killed by the battle spears at close range. Some of them were even splashed with divine blood. Swoosh! The South Continent's war soldiers immediately retrieved the dozen or so battle spears. To a certain extent, the battle spears in the war soldiers' hands were also divine artifacts. The battle soldier's spear could be retracted at will. Attack! At this time, an angry roar came from the South Continent's battle formation. In the next moment, 10,000 South Continent soldiers struck their spears at the same time. The sound of something tearing through the air suddenly rang out, and tens of thousands of beams of divine light shot into the sky. The scene was too spectacular, and the densely packed divine light fell toward the Nantian City army. Defend! An old, angry roar came from the Nantian City army. Then, the battle formation of the Nantian City army began to operate wildly. A layer of divine light emerged from the battle formation and enveloped all the Nantian City's war soldiers. The divine light that pierced through the sky like raindrops instantly fell on the light screen. The light screen immediately shook, and the beams of divine light pierced the light screen. However, they could not completely break through the light screen. The spears could only pierce through half of the light screen, and then could not go any further. Soon, the light screen above the Nantian City army was filled with the spears of the South Continent's war soldiers. Retreat! The old man wiped his cold sweat and gave the order. The Nantian City's war soldiers immediately fled toward Nantian City, not daring to fight the South Continent's war soldiers. Humph! At this time, a cold laugh came from the distance. Then, a beam of sword light directly slashed down from the sky toward the retreating Nantian City war soldiers. The beam of sword light was extremely fast. It only took a moment for it to appear above the Nantian City war soldiers' battle formation, leaving a pitch-black space crack in the void. Roar! In the battle formation of Nantian City's warriors, the black-robed elder standing in the eye of the formation roared angrily. His long hair danced wildly, and in an instant, the power of the battle formation was gathered on the black staff in his hand. The black staff in the old man's hand immediately radiated endless black light, turning into a black dragon that rose from the sky and met the immortal sword light. In the next moment, an incomparably shocking scene appeared. The blade light flashed by and actually directly split the black dragon that was soaring into the sky into two. The black dragon immediately revealed its true form after being split. The two halves of the black staff fell from the sky. In the Nantian City war soldiers' battle formation, the black-robed old man in the formation eye immediately turned pale when the black dragon was split in half by the sword light. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Saber Emperor! The black-robed old man raised his head and stared at the blurry figure in the distant sky. His eyes emitted two extremely sharp beams of divine light. At this time, Nantian City could already be seen. The black-robed old man gathered the power of the battle formation and launched an all-out attack. Finally, he blocked the immortal sword light, but the countless spears that were stuck in the light curtain were taken back by the South Continent war soldiers. However, the South Continent Saber Emperor Yi Jingshan's one-strike kill was no joke. Although the sword light was blocked by the black-robed old man's black staff, it still fell from the sky. The sword light was invincible and directly broke the light curtain above the South Continent war soldiers' heads. In an instant, dozens of Nantian City war soldiers were turned into blood mist, their bodies and souls destroyed. The Saber Emperor's saber is really powerful. Nie Jingyun, who had been watching this scene coldly in the distant sky, could not help but narrow his eyes. The Saber Emperor's saber principle cultivation could definitely be described as terrifying. Do we have a chance of winning? Peng Jingtian, who was next to Nie Jingyun, also looked at the Saber Emperor in the distance. Of course. Nie Jingyun was very confident. He had always believed that his saber was the most powerful saber in the ancestral god realm. The sabers of others were trash and could not withstand a single blow. Gu Fei's doppelganger appeared in front of Nie Jingyun and Peng Jingtian. Brother Gu! Nie Jingtian hurriedly cupped his hands at Gu Fei's doppelganger. Brother Gu! Peng Jingtian also hurriedly greeted Gu Fei's doppelganger with a smile. He did not dare to slight Gu Fei's doppelganger. After all, if they lost Gu Fei's support, it would be difficult for them to even defend the East Continent. Gu Fei's doppelganger only nodded and did not say anything. Chapter 3574. The Nantian City army wanted to escape to Nantian City. Once they entered the city, even Blade Emperor Yi Jingxun would not be able to do anything to them. However, Saber Emperor Yi Jingxun would not let Nantian City's army escape so easily. Without hesitation, he attacked. Swoosh! The immortal blade light appeared once again. This time, the blade light descended from the sky. Although the blade light wasn't that dazzling, the might it displayed was enough to make one's heart palpitate. It was as if the blade could split the world in half. A destructive aura filled every inch of the void. How dare you! The battle formation of the Nantian City army was operating crazily. The black-robed old man operated the killing formation with all his might. The power of tens of thousands of cultivators gathered in a divine bead in his hand. After the divine bead in the black-robed old man's hand swallowed a large amount of essence, it burst out with a divine light that was much brighter than the sun in the sky. An extremely powerful wave of divine power surged out of the divine bead in the black-robed old man's hand. The divine bead gathered the power of tens of thousands of cultivators. Coupled with the black-robed old man's power, the power contained in the divine bead was too powerful. Go! The black-robed old man had been preparing. When he saw the Blade Emperor's blade light coming at him, he did not hesitate to throw the divine bead in his hand. Boom! With a loud bang, the divine bead that flew out of the black-robed old man's hand collided with the blade light falling from the sky. An extremely powerful force erupted. The power contained in the divine bead completely erupted. The entire sky seemed to have exploded, and the mighty divine power of destruction destroyed everything. A huge black hole appeared in the sky. Everyone was shocked to see this scene. Although Peng Outyan had died in battle, there were still experts from the Peng clan in Nantian City. He blocked it. Countless cultivators in the battle formation of Nantian City raised their heads to look at the destructive scene in the sky. They were all stunned. The mighty storm of power from the sky shook the entire battle formation. However, at this moment, a blade light directly broke the black hole in the sky and instantly struck the battle formation of Nantian City. In the next moment, the black-robed old man, who was standing in the eye of the formation, looked at the sky in horror. A bloody mark had appeared on his forehead and was spreading downwards. The black-robed old man's eyes had completely lost their light and vitality. Then, the black-robed old man's divine body was instantly split in half. Then, the entire battle formation began to collapse from the formation eye. Terrifying saber-chi fluctuations swept out in all directions with the formation eye as the center. Countless soldiers did not even have time to react before they were directly killed by the exploding saber-chi. Their bodies and souls were destroyed, and more than half of the tens of thousands of Nantian City cultivators were killed. Only about 10,000 cultivators managed to escape, but they were so stunned that they forgot to run away. Swoosh! Another blade light flashed by and the 10,000 cultivators were sliced in half at the waist at the same time. Not only did the terrifying blade light cut through the cultivators' divine bodies, but it also destroyed their nascent souls. How ruthless! Watching this scene, the experts of the ancestral god realm couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. The Saber Emperor's killing intent was too strong, almost comparable to that of a sword slave. This guy. Nie Jingyun stared at the figure in the distant sky, and a terrifying battle intent erupted from his body. He wanted to attack, but he still resisted the urge. Now was not the time, and his condition was not good enough. If he wanted to fight with the Saber Emperor, he would have to send a battle invitation and set a time and place. But now, two extremely sharp gazes swept over from afar and landed on Nie Jingyun. The Saber Emperor instantly locked on to Nie Jingyun. At this moment, the Saber Emperor's aura and condition were both at their peak. His blade was stained with blood, and his battle intent was also at its peak. Yi Jingxun's essence, qi, and spirit were all at their peak. At this moment, he was definitely the strongest. Nie Jingyun was not in his best condition. If he fought with Yi Jingxun now, he would definitely lose. This was without a doubt. Nie Jingyun naturally would not be so foolish as to attack at this moment. However, Nie Jingyun had no choice but to attack now. The Saber Emperor had already locked onto him, and could attack him at any time. The Saber Emperor, Yi Jingxun, was one of the most terrifying killing gods in the South Continent. His reputation for killing with one blade wasn't just for show. Nie Jingyun did not want to die under Yi Jingxun's blade. What an arrogant Saber Emperor! Ping Jingtian, who was standing beside Nie Jingyun, was very unhappy. It seemed that Yi Jingxun had directly ignored him and Gu Fei's clone. How dare he ignore them? In the next moment, Ping Jingtian felt his body tighten. He had actually been locked on by the Saber Emperor. What? Ping Jingtian could not help but be shocked and angry. This guy was indeed arrogant and presumptuous. You play with the blade, and I play with the sword. Do you think I'm afraid of you? A shocking sword aura erupted from Ping Jingtian's body, and the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. Ping Jingtian's sword cultivation might not be comparable to the sword slaves, but his sword cultivation was still very strong. If they really fought, he might be able to compete with the Saber Emperor. Gu Fei's clone watched this scene, but he had no intention of making a move. Although the Saber Emperor was strong, if Nie Jingyun and Ping Jingtian couldn't defeat the Saber Emperor, then his clone wouldn't be able to change anything. After all, Gu Fei did not come with his real body. He was just a clone, and the battle strength of his clone was naturally not as strong as his real body. Using a blade just because of a disagreement? Gu Fei's clone touched his nose and shook his head helplessly. The Saber Emperor Yi Jingxun was indeed powerful. Of course, he also had the ability to be powerful. The Saber Emperor had his eyes on Nie Jingyun. This caused the surrounding experts of the ancestral god realm to be inexplicably shocked. Was this guy crazy? He actually dared to attack whoever he wanted to. Some experts saw that the situation was not good and immediately retreated. It would be terrible if they were targeted by this man. Nie Jingyun. The Saber Emperor's voice rang out. Although it was not loud, it reached the ears of every cultivator present. What? That person is Nie Jingyun? Someone exclaimed. The East Continent's Saber ancestor Nie Jingyun was famous in the East Continent. Although he had disappeared for countless years, there were still countless people who remembered his name. At this time, the cultivators in Nantian City were scared out of their wits. The South Continent's soldiers had once again arrived outside Nantian City, and this time, even the old ancestor had died in battle. Both Pang Tong and the old ancestor were rare experts in the Pang clan, but they died in battle just like that. The people of the Pang clan in Nantian City could not believe their eyes. This time, it was difficult for Nantian City to organize any more forces. This was because the tens of thousands of cultivators led by the black-robed old man were the last strength of the Pang clan. Chapter 3575. Saber Emperor Yi Jingxun had his eyes on Saber Master Nie Jingyun. As the Saber Emperor of South Continent, Yi Jingxun was known as the One Saber Killer. He was definitely one of the most terrifying killing gods in South Continent, but Nie Jingyun's background was not inferior to the Saber Emperor's. Nie Jingyun was the Saber Master of East Continent. He had almost been killed by Ouyang Feng, but he had survived in the end and improved his saber principle. These two Blade Dao Supremes had never met before, but today, they finally met. Without words, the two Blade Dao Supremes immediately knew who the other was. Do you want to fight? Nie Jingyan stared at Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin in the sky, his battle intent surging. His hair was in a mess, and the ancient saber on his back was vibrating as if it would fly out of its scabbard at any time. His spirit chi had been raised to its limit. However, compared to Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin, Nie Jingyan was still a little weaker. After all, Yi Jingxin had killed tens of thousands of cultivators. Nie Jingyan was not a weakling, and it would not be easy for Yi Jingxin to kill the Saber Master of East Continent with one move. Humph! Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin sneered without saying a word. The battle intent that erupted from his body became stronger, and the void around him shook. This was Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin's response to Nie Jingyan. Let's fight then. Who's afraid of whom? Peng Jingtian, who was standing beside Nie Jingyan, stared at the Saber Emperor and said coldly. A strong battle intent also erupted from his body, and the shadow of a golden rock appeared faintly on his body. Chaotic golden rock? Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin glanced at Peng Jingtian and said in surprise. Sigh. Looks like I've really been ignored. Gu Fei's doppelganger suddenly sighed and said. Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin did not pay any attention to Gu Fei's doppelganger, which made Gu Fei's doppelganger very depressed. Was his cultivation and battle strength really not good enough? Peng Jingtian wanted to laugh when he heard the words of Gu Fei's doppelganger, but he did not dare to laugh. Although this guy looked harmless, he was definitely a fierce person. At this time, everyone was extremely nervous. The Saber Emperor and the Saber Master were confronting each other. Everyone wanted to know who was stronger between the two supreme Saber Masters. Yi Jingxin and Nie Jingyan's momentum was still rising, and they could attack at any time. The Saber Emperor and the Saber Master were definitely the most dangerous figures in the realm right now. At this time, the most nervous ones were the cultivators in Nantian City. If the Saber Emperor and the Saber Master could fight to the death, they would naturally be more than happy to see that happen. However, the Saber Emperor and Saber Su, who was Master, Hu the Shin, Emperor and the Master. Emperor Yi Longxing Emperor on the horn, King, Longshin, Hu Emperor, Emperor Santian, the God, was Long, the Master, Emperor of God. When the Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin heard the horn, he couldn't help being startled. Then, he rode his flame lion and slowly retreated into the distance. He didn't dare to be careless. It had to be known that if he revealed an opening, his opponent would very likely launch a fatal attack at him. He, Emperor of Yi of Chen as young as. Let's fight next time! Nie Jingyan looked at Yi Jingxin, who was retreating carefully, before saying this. All right. When Yi Jingxin heard this, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Nie Jingyan said that they would fight again next time, so they would fight again next time. With Nie Jingyan's status, it was impossible for him to use such a method to plot against him. Swoosh! Yi Jingxin rode the fire lion and chased after the South Continent's divine tribe. Soon, Yi Jingxin led the South Continent divine race army and disappeared in the distant sky, returning to the base camp of the South Continent army 100,000 miles away. At this time, the cultivators in Nantian City finally breathed a sigh of relief. If Saber Emperor Yi Jingxin attacked the city, they might not be able to stop him. The Saber Emperor and his South Continent army retreated, giving the Pang clan's disciples in Nantian City a chance to catch their breath. Boom! Just as everyone was in a state of bewilderment, a loud explosion rang out from the distance. Then, the entire world began to shake violently as if it was about to be destroyed. An extremely powerful aura appeared between heaven and earth. It's Nan Batian. How is this possible? At this time, all the experts in the ancestral god realm were inexplicably shocked. Wasn't Nan Batian dead? What the hell was going on? Was Nan Batian still alive? Pang Outyan did not hesitate to self-destruct to kill Nan Batian. This was something that everyone saw with their own eyes. Nan Batian should have been destroyed in both body and soul. Could it be a golden silkworm shedding its shell? Gu Fei's doppelganger said in shock. Nan Batian might have cultivated some kind of secret technique and escaped death. This kind of technique shocked him. The terrifying aura spread between heaven and earth, infinitely close to the extreme grade realm. One should know that the current ancestral god realm was different. The ancestral god realm suppressed the extreme grade realm. Once the extreme grade realm appeared, heaven and earth would send a terrifying heavenly punishment to obliterate the extreme grade realm. This guy, Peng Jingtian, was shocked. Nan Batian was definitely a terrifying existence. Even he might not be a match for this ruthless person. Let's go back, Gu Fei's doppelganger said. At this time, in the eastern region of the central continent of the ancestral god realm, the million-strong celestial race army of the eastern continent gathered in Eastern Heaven City. Sun Ke personally led this army. The Pang clan was shocked. At this time, the Pang clan could no longer care about the southern region. Compared to the southern region, the situation in the eastern region was much more serious. At this time, the Pang clan was also gathering all the strength they could. Nearly 1 million celestial race soldiers gathered near Eastern Heaven City. Banners fluttered in the wind around Eastern Heaven City. Murderous intent soared to the sky. Countless celestial race soldiers stood quietly in the void, forming battle formations. Each battle formation emitted terrifying energy fluctuations. The old ancestor of the Pang clan could no longer sit still. He brought his injured body to supervise the battle. Peng Zhenhuan was the commander of the Pang clan army. At this time, a powerful figure stood on a chariot pulled by 6 old dragons. This middle-aged man was the patriarch of the Pang clan. Not everyone could sit on this chariot. The 6 old dragons were like 6 real dragons. Only the patriarch of the Pang clan could sit on this chariot. Murderous intent soared to the sky near Eastern Heaven City. However, apart from the sound of the banners in the wind, not even the roars of battle beasts could be heard. You want to fight, Song Ke? The old ancestor's voice rang in the patriarch's mind. That's right. Pang Zhenhuan, the patriarch of the Pang clan, did not hide his purpose. Then we must prepare well. The old ancestor's voice rang again. Yes, old ancestor. Pang Zhenhuan hurriedly replied. Although he was the patriarch of the Pang clan, he dared not show any disrespect in front of the old ancestor. Since Tsang Ke dared to come to the central continent and behave atrociously, I will let him know who the real ruler of the central continent is. Not everyone can have designs on the central continent. At this moment, all the experts in the central continent, and even the entire ancestral god realm, were attracted to the battle. Everyone wanted to know if the Pang clan could unify the central continent, or if Sun Ke, the outsider, would become the ruler of the central continent. Gu Fei's doppelganger, Peng Jingtian, and Ye Jingyun returned to the eastern region. Sun Ke immediately gathered his subordinates to discuss the next step. This required a detailed plan and could not be carried out recklessly. The Pang clan's power in the central continent was definitely the strongest. However, a force that could threaten the Pang clan had appeared. Over the years, although there had been many wars in the central continent, none of the forces could truly threaten the Pang clan. Tsang Ke's appearance caused an unknown variable to appear in the ancestral god realm. No one had expected Tsang Ke to be so powerful, unifying the eastern continent in a short period of time, and then attacking the Pang clan. Gu Fei's doppelganger was not interested in Tsang Ke's schemes. He strolled around Eastern Heaven City, which was filled with battle soldiers. Eastern Heaven City was an ancient divine city. Ever since he arrived, Gu Fei's doppelganger felt that this ancient divine city was not ordinary. Eastern Heaven City was like a terrifying sleeping heavenly beast. Gu Fei's doppelganger had a feeling that once the power of Eastern Heaven City exploded, even Tian Fa would not be able to suppress it. He wanted to see what was so special about this Eastern Heaven City. However, when Gu Fei's doppelganger walked on the streets of this ancient divine city, he could not sense anything. This surprised him. What's going on? Gu Fei's doppelganger was in disbelief. One must know that even with his cultivation, he could not sense anything special about this ancient divine city. This was too amazing. Hey, the one in black. I'm talking about you. Don't look around. Just as Gu Fei's doppelganger walked outside the city lord's residence, a loud shout came from the front. Gu Fei's doppelganger looked up and saw a spear-wielding middle-aged general walking over with a dozen battle soldiers. The leading middle-aged general shouted at Gu Fei's doppelganger. "What are you doing?" When Gu Fei's doppelganger saw the fiendish middle-aged general walking towards him, he could not help but frown. "Brat, are you blind? Where is this place? Is it somewhere you can come? Hurry up and *ck off." The middle-aged general came in front of Gu Fei's doppelganger and pointed at Gu Fei's doppelganger's nose as he spoke loudly. "You've got guts!" Gu Fei's doppelganger could not help but give the middle-aged general a thumbs up. No one had dared to speak to him like this in a long time. This middle-aged general was too awesome. "Of course I have guts. Only you sissy bastards are gutless," the middle-aged general said disdainfully. "AI. Looks like ignorance is also a kind of happiness." Gu Fei's doppelganger shook his head helplessly. "You brat, hurry up and *ck off. Do you want me to use a palanquin to carry you away?" The middle-aged general roared at Gu Fei's doppelganger. The spittle he spat almost flew onto Gu Fei's doppelganger's face. "Old Wu, what's going on? Why is it so noisy?" Chapter 3576. Gu Fei's clone was strolling around Eastern Sky City. Unknowingly, he had strolled to the front of the city lord's mansion. Then, he was very unfortunately disturbed. A middle-aged warrior guarding the gate directly blocked Gu Fei's clone's path, then directly told Gu Fei's clone to scram. Ever since he came to the ancestral god realm, no one had ever dared to speak to Gu Fei like this. Gu Fei's clone couldn't help but admire this guy. This guy had guts. Gu Fei's clone was very helpless. He also couldn't be bothered to pay attention to this guy and was about to leave. But at this time, a white-robed young cultivator walked out from the city lord's mansion. When this young cultivator saw Gu Fei's clone, he was immediately dumbfounded. "Old Kai, what's wrong?" The middle-aged warrior couldn't help but be shocked when he saw the white-robed young man dumbfounded. He then followed the white-robed young man's gaze and saw that the white-robed young man was dumbfounded when he scolded the black-robed young man. "What's wrong?" The white-robed young man suddenly forcefully slapped himself a few times. The slaps were loud and clear. Both sides of his face were swollen and blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. "Old Kai, you!" Seeing the white-robed young man slap himself, the middle-aged warrior was dumbfounded and looked at the white-robed young man in disbelief. "Old Wu, you bastard!" The white-robed young man came to his senses and directly punched the middle-aged warrior. Bang! Kacha! With a scream, the middle-aged warrior clutched his nose and staggered. Blood flowed out from the gaps between his fingers. "Old Kai, you're crazy!" the middle-aged warrior screamed. At this time, the soldiers outside the city lord's mansion were all dumbfounded. They were at a loss and didn't know what to do. One must know that the middle-aged warrior and the white-robed young man were both warriors guarding the city lord's mansion. The two of them had a very good relationship. But no one expected that the white-robed young man would suddenly attack and actually punch the middle-aged warrior. "You're the crazy one." The white-robed young man directly kicked the middle-aged warrior. Then, the soldiers behind the middle-aged warrior suffered a calamity. All of them were sent flying by the middle-aged warrior. "Kai-ao, I'm not finished with you!" The middle-aged general was completely enraged. He charged over from afar and spat out a sword light that pierced towards the white-robed young man. "My lord, please don't blame this blind fellow for his rudeness." At this moment, the young General Kai-ao was currently apologizing to Gu Fei's clone with a respectful and reverent attitude, not daring to be disrespectful in the slightest. When the middle-aged general saw this scene, he could not help but be startled and hurriedly withdrew the flying sword that he had spat out. "Old Kai, what are you doing? What are you playing at?" The middle-aged general looked at the young General Kai-ao and Gu Fei's clone in bewilderment. In his eyes, this black-robed youth was very ordinary, just a small cultivator. Was there a need to be so respectful towards him? However, since he could become a champion, this fellow called Old Wu was no fool. Kai-ao was a powerhouse who was not weaker than him. This is Lord Gu. You even dared to scold him. You really don't know how to write the word death. Hurry up and come over to apologize. Kaeo roared at the middle-aged general. The middle-aged general was confused. Lord Gu? That Lord Gu? You. Kaeo was anxious. This fellow was simply hopeless. Why did he still care about his life and death? Gu Fei's clone smiled and did not say anything. Was his reputation really that small? Even this fellow had not heard of his great name before? And that Lord Gu? Kaeo was truly speechless. At this moment, the middle-aged general's nose was bleeding and his face was stained with blood. He looked very ferocious and wretched. His nose bridge had been broken by Kaeo. Could it be? At this moment, the middle-aged general suddenly thought of something. Then, his entire body trembled. He was not agitated but afraid. Lord Gu? The middle-aged general's voice was trembling. Gu Fei's clone smiled helplessly and said, Am I that scary? When he heard the words of Gu Fei's clone, the middle-aged general immediately knelt on the ground. His legs had gone soft, and he could not even stand steadily. Lord Gu. The middle-aged general was so nervous and afraid that he could not speak fluently. Lord Gu, those who do not know will not be punished. Please give old Wu a chance. Kaeo pleaded. He and the middle-aged general were good friends. Naturally, he would not watch the middle-aged general be punished. All right, this is not a big deal. Let's leave it at that. Gu Fei's clone shook his head and walked towards the Castellan residence. At this moment, no one dared to stop him. He naturally would not lower himself to the same level as the middle-aged general. Gu Fei's clone returned to a courtyard in the Castellan residence. At this moment, several incomparably powerful figures appeared near the courtyard. Although Tsung Ke was the commander-in-chief of the East Continent's celestial race army in name, there were some people that even he could not mobilize. One had to know that some people's cultivation and combat strength were not below Tsung Ke's. In the distant past, they were even stronger and more famous than Tsung Quebec. The vast central continent was the home of countless celestial races. The number of celestial races living in the central continent far exceeded the number of celestial races living in the other 4 continents combined. At this time, all the powerful clans of the central continent were watching. A battle of this level was rare in the entire central continent, and it was only a limited number of times. The last time a war of this scale occurred was the War of Gods and Demons in the ancient era. After the War of Gods and Demons, the turmoil in the ancestral god realm gradually subsided. Before that, the wars between the various celestial races in the ancestral god realm were small skirmishes. However, things were different now. With the return of Tsung Ke and the unification of the East Continent, the Pang clan defeated the Heavenly Fire clan and became the overlord of the Central Continent. The entire ancestral god realm was in turmoil again. Countless living beings died in the War of Gods. This time, Tsung Ke gathered the power of the entire East Continent to attack the Central Continent. The impact of a war of this scale was enough to affect the entire ancestral god realm. The old ancestor of the East Pole sect ran around in an attempt to calm down the disputes. However, he didn't expect that the War of Gods in the ancestral god realm would escalate and become a world war-level storm that could affect the entire ancestral god realm. Sigh! The living beings of the world are pitiful! On a tall mountain outside the Pang clan's ancestral land, the old ancestor of the East Pole sect let out a long sigh. He turned to look at the ancestral land of the Pang clan and left in disappointment. That old ancestor of the East Pole sect is really naive. He actually wants us to make peace with Tsung Quebec. Is that even possible? An old voice came from an ancestral hall in the depths of the Pang clan's ancestral land. The voice was full of disdain. The owner of the voice didn't put the old ancestor of the East Pole sect in his eyes at all. It was impossible for the Pang clan to stop the war with Tsung Quebec. Even if Tsung Ke was willing to stop the war, the Pang clan wouldn't agree to it. One should know that the Pang clan's ancient soldiers were killed by the sword slaves. The Pang clan spent a lot of effort to cultivate these ancient soldiers. The Pang clan and Song Kei's Chaos Golden Rock clan had become mortal enemies. The Pang clan wouldn't let the Chaos Golden Rock clan off so easily. Although that old ancestor of the East Pole sect is a little long-winded, his words aren't completely nonsense. Another voice came from the ancestral hall. At this time, those who were qualified to discuss in the ancestral hall were the most important figures in the Pang clan. If these people walked out of the ancestral hall, they would definitely be existences that could dominate the entire ancestral god realm. "What do you want to do?" the old voice sounded. The owner of the voice was the progenitor of the Pang clan who sat on the throne in the ancestral hall. He was also the old ancestor of the Pang clan. There were a total of 3 progenitors in the Pang clan. 2 of the 3 progenitors of the Pang clan were in deep slumber in the ancestral vein of the earth. This was the reason why the Pang clan was still so strong and confident. If the 3 progenitors were to come together, Sung Kei and the Chaos Golden Rock clan would be annihilated with a wave of their hands. "Why don't we pretend to agree to make peace with Sung Kei and attack when he's unprepared? We'll annihilate Sung Kei's million-strong army in Eastern Sky City," the patriarch of the Pang clan, Pang Zhenhuan, said. That's a good idea." The Pang clan's progenitor nodded. Using peace talks to numb the other party and then annihilate them. But would this really work? "But this is too risky. What if the other party pretends to make peace like us?" another person said. It was an old ancestor of the Pang clan named Pang Outsong. "We must be vigilant. If we're prepared, we still have a high chance of success," Pang Zhenhuan said confidently. "There's no harm in trying." The Pang clan's progenitor nodded. This could minimize the Pang clan's losses. The Pang clan could not afford to suffer any more losses. At this time, the situation in Southern Sky City in the Central Continent's southern region was very grim. Southern Sky City could be breached by the Southern Continent's army at any time. But at this time, the Pang clan could no longer send any reinforcements. All their forces must be used to eliminate Sung Kei's army first. After getting rid of Sung Kei, they would return to deal with the Southern Continent's army. This was the Pang clan's current plan. They would first eliminate the strong enemy, then sweep the weak ones. The Pang clan's ancestral hall fell silent. No one spoke. Since the progenitor had already said so, who would refute? Wasn't this a slap to the progenitor's face? At this time, Eastern Sky City, in the main hall of the city lord's residence, Sung Kei gathered a group of higher-ups to discuss how to defeat the Pang clan, unify the Central Continent, and then the entire ancestral god realm. Even Sung Kei could not resist the temptation of being the master of the ancestral god realm. The Pang clan attacked the Skyfire clan in order to unify the entire ancestral god realm. The current situation was very advantageous to Sung Quebec. After defeating the Pang clan's 1,000 ancient soldiers, Sung Kei's morale soared. Chapter 3577. Sung Kei's camp was full of experts. The Earth Spirit clan, the Heavenly God clan, and the Black Snake clan had all turned up. The million-strong God clan army was definitely not a gimmick, but a real million-strong God clan army. In Eastern Sky City, countless experts had gathered in the city lord's mansion. Sung Kei was sitting on a throne in the main hall of the city lord's mansion. The seats on both sides of the hall were occupied by clan lords. Behind the seats stood many people, all of whom were ancestor-level existences. Not all ancestor-level existences were qualified to enter the city lord's mansion of Eastern Sky City. Whilst Sung Kei and a group of patriarch-level existences were discussing how to take action in the city lord mansion, Gu Fei's doppelganger was sitting cross-legged under a big tree in a courtyard. Powerful figures could be faintly seen in the surroundings of the courtyard, guarding it. Although Eastern Sky City was overcrowded, no one dared to go near the courtyard where Gu Fei was. The surroundings of the courtyard were very quiet. Gu Fei's clone had a high status in Sung Kei's camp. Gu Fei was not interested in military formations. To him, all plots and schemes were useless in the face of absolute power. Just like how the sword slave fought against the Pang clan's ancient soldiers, they were killed with a single strike. Even if the ancient soldiers formed a battle formation, they would not be able to withstand a single blow from the sword slave. Gu Fei's clone wouldn't act rashly in the central continent. If Sun Ke could handle it, he wouldn't have to do it himself. At this moment, a God clan army suddenly appeared outside Eastern Sky City. Countless cultivators in the city were alarmed by their powerful aura. The East Continent's army that had gathered near Eastern Sky City reacted immediately. 10,000 soldiers formed a battle formation and charged towards the incoming God clan army. It was the Black Snake clan's battle formation. A shocking murderous aura erupted from the formation, causing the heavens and earth to lose their color. "Stop!" A loud shout came from the mysterious battle formation. Then, the battle formation immediately stopped, and a murderous aura filled the void. The Dusk Snake clan's battle formation stopped as well. The two battle formations faced each other in the sky, their swords drawn, and it seemed as if a great battle could break out at any time. "What's going on?" A warrior general walked out from the Black Snake clan's battle formation. He stared at the battle formation in front of him, bewildered. This wasn't a warrior from the Pang clan. The ancient soldiers of the Pang clan were completely annihilated. In a short period of time, the ancient soldiers of the Pang clan would definitely not dare to come again. Moreover, this battle troop was slightly different from the others. Every single battle troop carried a large sword on their back, and every single battle troop gave off extremely powerful ripples of sword chi. This was a sword formation. The murderous aura emanating from it was much stronger than that of the Black Snake clan's battle formation. Outside the courtyard of Gu Fei's clone, a figure leaning against a big tree suddenly raised his head. His eyes emitted an incomparably resplendent divine light. An obscure and powerful wave of sword chi emanated from his body. "My disciple is here, go and receive him!" At this moment, the voice of Gu Fei's clone rang out in the servant's mind. The sword slave was startled when he heard this. He immediately soared into the sky, out of Eastern Sky City, and appeared between the two battle formations. "Who's master's disciple?" The sword slave glanced at the sword formation in front of him. This sword formation was also extraordinary. The aura of each warrior was connected into one. Once the sword formation was activated, it would definitely be earth-shattering. In the sword slave's opinion, the Black Snake clan's battle formation was nothing compared to this sword formation. Once the battle started, more than half of the Black Snake clan's battle troop would be instantly annihilated. The sword slave didn't respond to the sword formation. "Who's master's disciple?" the sword slave asked again. He realized that his temper seemed to have calmed down ever since he started following Gu Fei. He had become more patient. "Are you talking about me?" The sword slave waited for a while before a weak voice came from the sword formation. Then, a figure walked out of the sword formation. "You!" The sword slave was slightly surprised when he saw this young cultivator. This fellow's cultivation was a little too weak. Master actually accepted this person as a disciple? In front of a sword slave, Shimini Jian's cultivation was naturally not worth mentioning. Even if Shimini Jian blew a mouthful of air, he would be able to extinguish this little fellow. "Follow me!" After sizing up Shimini Jian, the sword slave extended his hand and grabbed Shimini Jian before disappearing into the void. This? An old man in the sword formation couldn't help but be startled when he saw this scene. Shimini Jian was taken away just like that, but he didn't make a move. That person just now was very terrifying. It was hard to imagine that someone could actually cultivate sword Dao to such a level. Even the Shimin clan leader's sword Dao cultivation couldn't compare to this fellow. The old man thought to himself, "It seems like it's time for my Shimin clan to rise." Because of Shimini Jian, the Shimin clan had formed a relationship with Gu Fei. Therefore, in the upcoming war in the central continent, the Shimin clan chose to stand on Gu Fei's side. At this time, the battle formation formed by the mysterious snake army was still blocking in front of the Shimin clan's sword formation. Some K didn't know that Gu Fei had accepted Shimini Jian as a disciple. But at this time, the Eastern Continent's God clan's army also knew that the Shimin clan's army had arrived. The Shimin clan's influence in the central continent wasn't small, but compared to the Pang clan, Skyfire clan, and Kanglan clan, it was still a lot weaker. If the Pang clan and the other two clans were super forces, then the Shimin clan could only be considered as a second-rate force. It was incomparable to a first-rate force like the Pang clan. Master! At this time, in a courtyard of the city lord manor, Shimin Yijian knelt in front of Gu Fei's clone. Gu Fei's clone was sitting cross-legged under a big tree, but his eyelids didn't even twitch. The sword slave didn't enter the courtyard. Instead, he stood guard outside. Time trickled by. 2 hours had passed. Shimin Yijian, who was kneeling in front of Gu Fei's clone, didn't dare to get up because Gu Fei's clone hadn't said anything yet. The two battle formations that were facing each other in the sky had already retreated. 4 hours passed. 6 hours passed. Shimin Yijian was still kneeling on the ground, motionless. He didn't even raise his head. As long as Gu Fei's clone didn't ask him to get up, he would never get up. Shimin Yijian knelt for more than 6 hours before Gu Fei exhaled and opened his eyes. Master! When Shimin Yijian saw that Gu Fei's clone had stopped cultivating, he was pleasantly surprised. Chapter 3578. The Shimin clan chose to stand on Gu Fei's side, and they decided to send their army to join Song Kei's camp to suppress the Pang clan. However, the East Continent's God clan army became nervous because of the appearance of the Shimin clan's army. The two battle formations faced each other in the sky. However, the Shimin clan's battle formation and the East Continent's Black Snake clan's battle formation retreated very quickly. Song Kei had already received the news that Gu Fei's clone had accepted Shimin Yijian as his disciple. To Song Kei, this was definitely a good thing. The Shimin clan was a local force in the Central Continent, and the other forces in the Central Continent found it hard to believe that the Shimin clan had sided with Sun Quebec. One must know that the Pang clan was extremely powerful, and the other forces in the Central Continent did not think highly of Sun Quebec. However, some forces in the Central Continent had a different view of Song Kei's God clan army. One must know that the East Continent's God clan army had defeated the Pang clan's ancient soldiers not long ago. The achievements of Song Kei's God clan army shocked all the forces in the Central Continent. At this moment, Song Kei's figure appeared outside the courtyard where Gu Fei's clone was. He was here to look for Gu Fei's clone to understand the Shimin clan. However, just as Song Kei was about to enter the courtyard, the sword slave suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked his way. Song Kei frowned when he saw the sword slave. The sword slave's cultivation and combat strength were definitely not below his, and he did not want to offend the sword slave. Come in! At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the courtyard, and the sword slave retreated to the side. Song Kei glanced at the sword slave and walked into the courtyard. When he arrived at the courtyard, he saw Gu Fei's clone sitting cross-legged on a big rock under a big tree, and a young cultivator was standing beside him. This young cultivator's cultivation was very weak, but the sword aura that emanated from his body was extremely sharp. A sword Dao cultivator? Song Kei was very curious as to why Gu Fei would accept such a disciple. What benefits did it bring him? Shimin clan was only a second-rate force in the Central Continent, not even a first-rate force. Gu Fei's clone naturally wouldn't accept such a disciple for the sake of Shimin clan. In fact, what Song Kei didn't know was that the reason why Gu Fei's doppelganger accepted this disciple was mostly due to a whim. This is Shimin Yijian, my disciple. Gu Fei's doppelganger jumped down from the boulder and came to the side of the stone table. He took out 2 jade cups and a jade pot and pulled out the stopper. A faint fragrance of wine immediately filled the air. This is... Song Kei was shocked when he smelled the wine fragrance. At this time, Gu Fei's doppelganger had already filled 2 cups of wine and put away the jade pot. Song Kei lowered his head and saw that the cup of wine in front of him was extremely clear, like spring water without any impurities. The faint fragrance of the wine made him feel intoxicated even before he drank it. This was a kind of wine that Gu Fei brewed with the peaches of immortality in his spare time, and he named it the Immortality Peach Wine. The immortality peaches from the immortality peach trees that were transplanted into his inner world were quasi-immortal divine medicines. There was definitely no one else in the ancestral god realm who could brew wine with quasi-immortal herbs. One should know that even if someone had a quasi-immortal herb, they would definitely not be willing to use it to brew wine. This was because in the eyes of others, using quasi-immortal herbs to brew wine was definitely a wastrel. Great wine! Sankei picked up the wine cup and tasted it bit by bit. This was simply the best divine wine in the world. A single drop could bring a person back to life. The medicinal power of the quasi-immortal herb spread in Sankei's body, causing his qi and blood to flourish and his vitality to become stronger. What wine is this? Sankei said after finishing a cup of immortality peach wine. He was not satisfied. Peach wine? Gu Fei's clone said with a smile. Peach wine? Sankei was taken aback when he heard that. He then said, Is this wine brewed using the peach tree of immortality from the legendary peach tree of immortality? Peach tree of immortality? Gu Fei's clone said with a smile. It's not that exaggerated. It's just a wine brewed using the peach tree of immortality. Quasi-immortal wine? Sankei was still taken aback when he heard that. Shimini Jian, who was standing behind Gu Fei's clone, was already dumbfounded by Gu Fei's clone and Sankei's words. His master actually used quasi-immortal herbs to brew wine. He had only heard of people using quasi-immortal herbs to refine pills. When had he ever heard of someone using quasi-immortal herbs to brew wine? Can I have another cup? Sankei said with a smile. No! Gu Fei's clone rejected immediately. It was not easy to brew such a wine. He only had one pot with him, and it would be gone once he finished it. Sigh! Sankei smiled and did not insist. What business do you have with me? Gu Fei's clone asked. Nothing much, I just want to borrow a few men from you. Sankei went straight to the point. Sure, I can lend you the men I brought. Gu Fei's clone did not hesitate. He knew that the upcoming battle was extremely important to Tsang Quebec. If he won, Sankei could continue to dominate the ancestral god realm. If he lost, Sankei could only return to the eastern continent. This time, Gu Fei's real body did not come to the central continent. Only his clone had come. No one knew what other trump cards the Pang clan had up their sleeves. Thanks, I owe you another favor. Sankei was overjoyed. He was confident now. It's good that you know. Gu Fei's clone didn't stand on ceremony with Tsang Quebec. Since he owed Sankei a favor, he had to return it. When Gu Fei wanted Sankei to do something, Sankei couldn't say no. I'll take my leave then. I won't disturb you from teaching your disciples. Sankei had achieved his goal, so he naturally had to leave. Get lost. Now. Gu Fei's clone waved his hand. Sankei walked out of the courtyard with a smile. He brought the sword slave, divine monster, and Ye Jingyun with him. He was not Gu Fei's man, but a helper. Old ancestor Luo Xiao was also brought away by Tsang Quebec. In fact, Sankei came to Gu Fei's clone to bring the sword slave away. As for divine monster and old ancestor Luo Xiao, he did not place much importance on them. With the sword slave, he had a 60% chance of defeating the Pang clan. The Pang clan was a superforce in the central continent. But now, Sankei wanted to challenge the entire Pang clan. The outcome was unpredictable. I'm afraid he's going to make a move. Gu Fei's clone muttered in the courtyard. Chapter 3579. When Sankei came to borrow people from Gu Fei's avatar naturally would not reject him. If Sankei's Chaos Golden Rock race could unify the ancestral god realm, it would be a good thing for him. It had to be known that the people in the primogenitor realm were starting to get restless. Perhaps they were the masterminds behind the chaos in the various worlds. The primogenitor's realm was the origin of the myriad worlds. No one knew how powerful the existences in the primogenitor's realm were. However, Gu Fei's avatar knew that those fellows in the primogenitor's realm were absolutely terrifying. Along with Shimin clan joining Sankei's camp, some forces of the central continent also came to seek refuge with Sankei, but Sankei didn't refuse any of them. However, there were some people from the Chaos Golden Rock race that were feeling uneasy. One must know that there were definitely spies amongst these fellows that had come to seek refuge. It was impossible for the Pang clan not to send spies in. However, Sankei was fearless. Even if the Pang clan spy sneaked in, what could he do? Apart from the Shimin clan, the other forces of the central continent that had come to seek refuge were all third-rate, or even fourth-rate forces. They were insignificant to the war situation. Not long after Sankei borrowed the sword slave from Gu Fei's clone, the Pang clan's envoy came knocking. The Pang clan wants peace? Sankei sat on his throne in the main hall of the city lord's mansion in eastern Sky City. He looked down at the emissary of the Pang clan and said disdainfully, "Please watch your words. My race is not seeking peace." The emissary of the Pang clan was an old man. This old man's cultivation was also very impressive. He was at the peak of the Holy Venerate realm. He was only half a step away from becoming a quasi-supremacy. "Haha, if it's not fear, then what is it?" Sankei laughed out loud as a powerful aura erupted from his body. The emissary from the Pang clan shuddered. He immediately felt as if a divine mountain was pressing down on him, and he almost knelt down. However, this guy was quite strong-willed and did his best to hold on. His entire body trembled, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans appeared on his forehead. "The Pang clan is a bunch of cowards," a middle-aged cultivator in the hall said disdainfully. "What a joke. Whether it's war or peace, is it up to your Pang clan to decide?" A white-haired old man mocked. Sankei's aura was aimed at the emissary from the Pang clan. The other people in the hall weren't affected at all, but at this time, the emissary's clothes were drenched in cold sweat. The emissary of the Pang clan was using all his strength to resist Sankei's aura, and he was already speechless. "See," he admitted it. "Sigh. Coward! Looks like the Pang clan is really afraid and wants to sue for peace. You want to make peace? Sure, but if you surrender unconditionally, everything will be fine, right?" Haha. The group of East Continent experts in the hall burst into laughter. Hearing the ridicule from the East Continent experts in the hall, the emissary from the Pang clan was so angry that his lips moved, but no words came out in the end. "All right, Scram. Go back and tell that ancestor of your clan that I'm going to exterminate the Pang clan. Tell him to wash his neck clean and wait," Sankei shouted. At this moment, the emissary from the Pang clan felt his body lighten, and the powerful aura emitted from his body disappeared. The emissary of the Pang clan cupped his hands at Sankei, who was sitting on the throne, and said nothing. He turned around and walked out of the hall, then soared into the sky and left East Sky City. However, the emissary of the Pang clan landed on a mountain peak 100 miles away from East Sky City. His face suddenly flushed, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His face instantly turned extremely pale. Sankei, the emissary of the Pang clan, had a ferocious look in his eyes. Then, he took out a jade talisman and crushed it. A ball of divine light immediately burst out from the broken jade talisman and instantly enveloped him. In the next moment, the emissary of the Pang clan disappeared into thin air with a whoosh. He was nowhere to be seen. Soon, a ball of divine light appeared on a teleportation formation platform in the depths of the Pang clan's ancestral land. Then, a figure appeared in the divine light. When the divine light dissipated, a figure stood on the teleportation formation platform. This person was the emissary of the Pang clan who had just crushed the jade talisman. The emissary of the Pang clan directly soared into the sky from the formation platform and rushed towards the ancestral hall in the sky. The emissary of the Pang clan entered the ancestral hall directly and saw a group of ancestor-level existences sitting in the ancestral hall. The ancestor sat on the throne and looked at him. The emissary of the Pang clan could not help but sweat when he saw this. He arrived before the ancestor's throne anxiously and knelt down. "How did it go?" asked the ancestor of the Pang clan on the throne. "Ancestor, Sankei doesn't know what's good for him. He actually refused to reconcile, and even said that he wanted to destroy our Pang clan. The emissary of the Pang clan told him what had happened in East Sky City. What? He's gone too far. Who does Sun Ke think he is? How dare he say such arrogant things? If he wants to fight, let's fight. Are we afraid of Sun Ke? Hearing the words of the emissary of the Pang clan, the ancestral hall of the Pang clan was in an uproar. One should know that since the War of Gods and Demons, no one had dared to say that they wanted to destroy the Pang clan. So what if Sun Ke unified the East Continent? This wasn't the East Continent. In that case, let's fight, said the ancestor of the Pang clan expressionlessly as he glanced at the experts of the Pang clan in the hall. I wanted to use this method to make the East Continent Celestial Race Army relax. It seems like this plan won't work. Pang Zhenhuan sighed and said, if it doesn't work, we'll fight them head-on. A ancestor of the Pang clan said coldly. Although the Pang clan had lost thousands of ancient soldiers, they were still powerful and had trump cards in their hands. How's the preparation? The ancestor of the Pang clan asked Pang Zhenhuan. Pang Zhenhuan hurriedly said, everything is ready. As long as Lord Primogenitor gives the order, our clan's army will sweep through the East Continent's army. Let's begin. As the progenitor of the Pang clan spoke, his eyes emitted a sharp glare. Yes, ancestor. Pang Zhenhuan quickly accepted the order and walked out of the ancestral hall. Just as the ancestor of the Pang clan was about to make a move, a figure suddenly appeared in the sky outside of the Zhongtian city. An extremely sharp wave of sword chi erupted from the figure. Enemy attack. In the next moment, there was an angry roar that spread throughout the entire Zhongtian city. Then, the entire Zhongtian city was enveloped by a ball of divine light. Rumble. A battle formation formed by the soldiers of the Pang clan rushed out of the Zhongtian city and charged towards the figure outside the city. Humph! The person sneered and waved his sword. A destructive force immediately erupted from his sword light. In the next moment, the soldiers that were charging at the front were instantly split into two. The disciples of the Qin clan who saw this scene in the Zhongtian city were shocked. Who is that person? How can he be so ferocious? Someone cried out in surprise. A single sword strike had broken a 10,000-man battle formation of the Pang clan. In the entire ancestral god realm, there were only one or two people who could do this, and the sword slave was one of them. It was the sword slave who had attacked. With his cultivation, he had not only broken a 10,000-man battle formation of the Pang clan with a single sword strike, but he had also killed thousands of soldiers. It was as if there was a rain of blood in the sky, and the air was filled with the smell of blood. The remaining soldiers were scared half to death by this scene. They immediately scattered in all directions, not daring to fight the sword slave. Swoosh! At this moment, a beam of divine light shot up from the Zhongtian city and pierced through the sword slave. But in the next moment, the sword slave's figure disappeared into the void. The divine light had only pierced through an afterimage, and did not harm the sword slave. Kill! The sword slave's figure appeared in the sky above the Zhongtian city, and then he slashed down with his sword. An extremely sharp sword light immediately rushed out of his hand and fell down. The sword light slashed down on the light shield of the defensive formation, and the entire light shield covering the Zhongtian city shook violently. The power of the defensive formation of the Zhongtian city had actually blocked the sword slave's attack. Kill! An expert of the Pang clan, who had regained his senses, immediately rushed out of the Zhongtian city and attacked the sword slave. His powerful aura seemed to be able to crush the heavens and earth. The defensive formation of the Zhongtian city was really amazing. People outside couldn't enter, but people inside could rush out. The expert of the Pang clan was definitely at the level of an ancestor. He attacked the sword slave aggressively, and a huge golden hand reached out to grab the sword slave. In the next moment, a scene that shocked all the cultivators in the Zhongtian city appeared. The sword slave slashed out again, and with a flash of sword light, the huge golden hand was split in half. Even the ancestor of the Pang clan was split in half. What? The disciples of the Pang clan and the Zhongtian city were all dumbfounded. The high and mighty ancestor was actually killed by that person with a single slash. At this time, there were many divine armies gathered near the Zhongtian city. Attack! A battle formation of 10,000 people charged over from the distance. Then, rays of divine light rushed out of the battle formation and pierced through the sword slave. The powerful waves of energy shook the heavens and the void. Swoosh! The sword slave soared into the sky, completely ignoring the penetrating divine light. The divine light directly shattered in the void, not even touching the sword slave's clothes. The sword slave was protected by sword chi, and no one could break through its protective sword chi. What? Seeing this scene, an elder in the battle formation of 10,000 people from the Pang clan was indescribably shocked. Retreat!